Hello, good afternoon, and welcome back to another video version of one of my Substack essays where I read it out loud to you live on YouTube with a very active chat of disabled transgender weirdos who contribute so much to everything I have to say, and I try to make the essay a little bit more accessible to people who can't read long things, who can't see, who just prefer to chain their media consumption with activities, etc. Hello, how's it going? It's a little bit later than my usual stream time here on a Thursday afternoon. How's everybody doing? I was just giving Loki a churu treat, also known as a delectable, also known as that nasty meat go-gurt. She is not much of a little treatopus. Not much of a treatopus generally. She's not very food motivated. She seems to have very little awareness of food and treats, but she does like the goop. Um, and my lovely friend Ty gave me some goop to give to her recently. So she was gooping. We were just gooping while I was reheating my coffee that I probably should not have. But let's go. Oh, thank you for subscribing, Chrome Drome. Welcome. Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to be reading my piece on hypermobility, Hypermobile Me. For those who have been following the blog for a long time, I had a horrible hand injury last year around this time. It was like early January into February, where my left hand was like basically unusable for a couple of weeks. I couldn't lock the door to my own apartment. I couldn't cook. I couldn't do a lot of stuff. I couldn't really move my thumb at all. And eventually, after looking at many, many different things, found out that I am hypermobile and probably just injured it from cranking that shit in a bunch of weird ways. Since then, I've obviously been really wary of fucking up my hand or in my knees and my ankles and all kinds of other joints in my body that are just crazy, crazy yielding. Let's say. And I've learned a lot more about hypermobility. And I've also learned like how little really scientifically we know about hypermobility, how little support there is medically for just researching supporting hypermobile bodies and modifying things like physical therapy, treatment programs. And I've just learned to listen to my body more and learned a lot of things about how some of the exercise I was doing and such probably contributed, and my sleeping position and stuff like that probably contributed to my nasty injury. So I wanted to distill everything I'd learned so far into a piece, because the piece about it last year seemed to be somewhat helpful to people and recognizable to people. And in the comment section for the original piece talking about my hand injury kind of helped some people find one another and talk about Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, hypermobility, spoony stuff, etc. So we'll do that today. It's going to be a little bit more brisk, I think, of a stream than what I've been doing typically lately, where we hem and haw and catch up and chill out for like an hour plus, purely because I have to go to anime club later. So I have to get to that in a few hours. So we'll talk a little bit about chronic illness stuff and being a spoonie. Some of that stuff I even kind of hesitate to use as a label for myself because, relatively speaking, I am so able-bodied. I can walk really long distances. I can lift things. I can do, now that my hand isn't injured, almost most like activities daily life by myself, no problem. I can work out. I just have to be really careful with certain things. But it is something that has flare-ups and weird moments of getting tweaked, and there are definitely limits on what I should be doing with my body, and ways that ignoring that would stack over time. So we're going to talk about it. I know a lot of people who watch these streams and participate in the Discord server, the Piscord, also have a ton of disabilities and chronic illnesses, so I'm sure people will have lots of stuff to share. So what I asked you while we were on the hold screen was basically what's something that you've learned about taking better care of your body, your specific body, recently, in the past year, in the past couple months, whatever the case might be. Male Valence says, I recently reintroduced occasional caffeine because I think it might help a bit when having a cluster headache episode. Black tea. I won't go back to having it regularly though, because I think overall it's better if I don't have it. I will still have decaf coffee and chocolate though. Um, yeah, yeah, that tracks male balance. I know a lot of people who get migraines specifically say that caffeine is a real help with that. And I am also kind of re-examining my relationship to caffeine. I quit it for a couple of years for anxiety, and then I think once I stopped testosterone, just because I know that was flooding my system with just so much more energy, it being a steroid and all, that once I quit caffeine, I felt like I could maybe handle it. Like I think being on E is just very calming. Um, if it doesn't make you mondo crazy dysphoric, which at this stage in my life it does not. And so I, for that and a couple of other reasons, I just started to start dabble. I decided to start dabbling with caffeine a little bit more in the last couple of months, and I don't think it's making me more anxious. It's hard to tell. Um, I've been doing like a half calf occasionally, which this is. Um, so we'll see. But uh, black tea, decaf, chocolate, great calls. And like now I can have like a little fun little matcha latte, which is not that caffeine heavy, I don't think. But I was kind of avoiding it for a long time. So yeah, yeah, navigating that balance of like these things are all drugs, and the fact that it's treated as just an unquestioned, unthought about daily consumption habit under capitalism and in most people's like work day schedules is seems very bad. It can definitely exacerbate stress and overwork and finding problems where there are none and all this stuff, which are all things I already struggle with. So maybe I shouldn't be doing it, but at least like navigating that relationship and questioning that relationship and experimenting with it, I think is always cool. Male Valence also says, I discovered my local dispensary sells 10 milligram CBD capsules. I will be using that to manage cluster headaches as well. Yeah, yeah. Oh God, that's yeah. I got a talking to from my doctor about complaining about having anxiety and kind of wanting to do something just physiologically, have something physiologically on hand to like chill it out, which I got beta blockers for, and also getting a little rap on the knuckles for smoking weed too much, um, without CBD. And that was the advice that my doctor gave me this week was, really think about your relationship to weed and whether or not it's making things worse. I know it definitely does make me more anxious a lot of the time, or it makes me ruminate in this underwater place where you're just rotating 3D spiders in your mind and thinking about reasons why your friends are mad at you, um, or whatever, thinking about things that could happen. And also, one thing that my doctor said was like, if you really think about how, when it comes to alcohol, people understand commonly that there's a difference between a shot and a beer and a glass of wine, even though in theory those things are equivalent-ish amounts of alcohol. The way you consume them and your relationship to them and how you feel are really different. The circumstances under which you consume them are different. And we don't really distinguish between those things when it comes to weed. Like people are ripping fat dabs all day long and saying it's medicine. And for a lot of people it is. But if you get anxiety from smoking weed, which also a lot of people do, then seeing like taking really big fat bong rips, or dabs or concentrates and stuff in high doses is just the equivalent to like having a little joint or like a few hits after work. Like those things aren't the same, and people might be kind of flooding themselves a little bit with some stressy chemicals. And she also said, just if you're gonna keep doing it, really look at the percentage of THC, because things are so potent these days compared to the weed that certainly my generation grew up with and generations before grew up with. So look at the percentage of THC and get some CBD in there. Get it at least to be a 1-to-1, which I do like how CBD feels, but you do need a little THC for it to be like consciously observable, usually due to the entourage effect. So yeah, CBD. I have had a few CBD seltzers that are like that they sell at like the gas stations and like corner stores around here that are like 25 milligram CBDs, and those have hit enough that I actually feel like a whole body calm where I can recognize that something's happening. Whereas a lot of pure CBD stuff, all it might be reducing something like a pain symptom or like stress, but it's so like physiological only that it's pretty easy to miss. Annika Transpeak says, I learned that with my pots, drinking electrolyte water is essential. I make my own now to save money. Yeah, salt, sodium, electrolytes, and pots are so needed, um, along with things like compression socks, anything that like keeps the blood flowing. Um, Annika says her recipe is 25 grams sodium chloride, 11.5 grams potassium chloride, 11.7 grams magnesium malate, blended all up into a powder, approximately 3.3 grams of the mix per liter of water, or adjust to taste. Hell yes. Um, uh, I said friend of the. I was about to say friend of the show, but this person is more like just one of my blorbos. Chicago, but we are oomphies on Tumblr. Chicago Geneza has a lot of different disability stuff that they talk about on their blog, and and just needing the saltiest water possible to be able to live, and that their body signals that to them, that like really salty, really electrolyte heavy water just is the only thing that hydrates them and makes it possible for them to be walking around. This shit got me walking around was something that they said once that's just like still stuck in my mind. Like when you get the right mix of medications or like nutrients and stuff and you're disabled, and you can just say, this shit got me walking around. Yeah, so electrolytes, so important. Airgender says, I'm slowly learning how to relax my freaking muscles with help from my cool trans RMT. Oh, I want the tips. Please. Please give us the tips. Here or in the Piscord. Transpeak says the electrolyte water tastes better than regular water, too. The texture, too. When there's, like, electrolytes in it, it feels more hydrating. Because it is. Cat Gogurt, Milvalent says. Milvalent says, I'm doing badly because my friend that I'm in love with is in crisis. I'm also in what I hope is the tail end of a cluster headache episode, which is exhausting. I have a CBD iced tea, though. A little light caffeine CBD combo, a little multi-track drifting. We love it. Hello, Sasha. Welcome. Good to see you, Drudgeworm. Only reason stopping by for a minute, only realizing I am hypermobile in the last couple years. Yeah. Was not remotely on my radar. Not at all. Even being like an autism guy and knowing that those things were really comorbid. I thought, oh, I don't have the stretchy skin. Like I thought I've never had any like dislocations, and I have some friends with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome who were just like subluxing their shoulders all the time. But as is so often the case for me, I think, oh well, it's not that bad. This thing that I'm experiencing that I've always pushed through, it's not that bad, so I must not have a thing. And then eventually it does get that bad. Or you learn that like in my case, my pain recognition is so bad that like something that other people would be seeking medical care for, both my pain awareness and my accessing of medical care are so bad that yeah, I actually had some shit going on. Valence says, I think it's fine to refer to yourself as a spoonie. Yes, yeah. And I think generally in the community, whether it's a physical disability or not, I think you can still potentially use spoonie if you have kind of limited and variable energy, which I think is true for a lot of autistic folks, and is true for me. So, yeah. But it does feel a little stolen valor because, like, having people in the chat who have like PEMS, post-exertional malaise, and POTS, and like things where they are truly physically laid out for days or months or years, it is very different. And I just want to acknowledge, that's very different. As much as there are, solidarity and commonality to be found there. Sasha says, recently I've been becoming more aware of when and how my joints get wonky. Also just putting more effort into taking care of my teeth. Yes, the wonky joints. Truly had no awareness that that's what was going on for me for a really long time. Like I thought I just liked moving around. I just thought I was weak. Like I was always in special ed gym, couldn't do push-ups, couldn't do sit-ups, couldn't do like any physical activity. A lot of doors were too heavy to me. Really uncoordinated. So I just all chalked it up like how difficult I found like standing still or holding my body up and sitting. Like I just thought I was like weak or like undisciplined. Not that like my body is like literally like more like less stable. It's literally less stable, so no wonder. Um, Evelyn says being a spoonie is very broad. Anyone who has to think about managing your activities. Yeah, that's true. I think especially if it's variable or unpredictable, there's flare ups and things like that. Sasha says I had a dentist appointment recently, went great, and thought about how much you like the dentist, sort of method acting as though I was a dentist enjoying guy to get through the discomfort. Oh yes, well if that's helpful, I'll speak to that for a little bit. I love the dentist. I love gum pain. Like, there's certain kinds of like, well, there's lots of kinds of pain that I like, but like gum pain, it just feels like this slight sting that you know is like doing something good for your body and making your gums tougher. I like the blood. Um, it feels kind of like oblique pain when you do like oblique exercises where it's just like this kind of tightness that is like very stimulating. I love the feeling of stuff getting scraped off the teeth. I love how the teeth look a little brighter afterward. I love just thinking about the chunks getting come off, and I think about Hannibal. I think about Hannibal Lecter in fucking Silence of the Lambs, the book, where when he's about to pick his lock, um, when he's being housed in the museum, he has a piece of a pen hidden in his mouth that he's going to use to pick the lock. And Thomas Harris writes about him kind of just very slowly and mindfully dragging his tongue over the surface of his teeth as if he's taking a relaxing walk in the Andes Mountains, like taking in every little sensation. So like I love teeth, I love mouth sensations, and I because my mom was a dental hygienist, I see receiving dental care as like an expression of like affection and not a scary thing. So if any of that stuff is good to just put into your own mind palace and pretend is true for you, then I'll say that. But I know a lot of people have really awful dental fear. Um, Valence says about the CBD stuff. The ones I'm having are like 1 milligram THC, so almost none. That's perfect. Like, because you still get the entourage effect where they both work more strongly and you notice them more. I'm so sad the only legal dispensary here doesn't sell CBD seltzers. They have a fun soda that I can't drink regularly because I don't want that much sugar. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Here in Chicago, like there's been an explosion of THC and CBD drinks. And that's happening more in other major cities too, though it kind of they occupy kind of a legal gray area because it's not in dispensaries, but a lot of times it's marketed as, Delta 8 THC or some other synthesized weed made from the hemp plant, so technically it's legal until the federal government makes some kind of concerted effort to ban it. But also people aren't really checking that closely. So it's kind of Calvin ball out here. And so there's lots of like CBD drinks, THC drinks, and mixes of them, even in bars, which is amazing. Like it's so nice to have an alternative to alcohol in so many bars. And also there's just a lot of people zooted out of their mind very casually, potentially all the time, and not even seeing it seriously as like a drug or something that could be affecting them. So that has its problems. That's certainly true of just dispensaries suddenly exploding across the country in general. Um, However, I will say that Delta 8 diet weed, as it is sometimes called, a lot of people do have an experience of that making them less anxious. And I think that's true for me. Less anxiety, less muscle tightness, and it's a weird high because you can kind of choose to tune into it or choose not to a little bit more. Like you can kind of rally and make yourself a little bit more sober if you need to. It feels like, or you can kind of sink into it. But there's all kinds of shit just circulating here, so it's very hard to know what any of it is, which is not great. And you never know the strain, which is Lena in the Discord server, the Discord server for this show, has said many times, like the specific strain that you are on and taking is the information you need to know, is this going to give me pain relief? Is it going to cause muscle tension? Is it going to make me horny? Is it going to cause a mood uplift? Is it going to cause depression? Like what? Every strain is a little bit different in terms of how it affects people, and knowing that stuff really helps. Air Gender says relaxing the body. I can repost in the Discord, but it's a lot of like consciously tense a muscle and then slowly let it relax to teach it that it can be not on. So yeah, like progressive muscle relaxation. I don't practice that much outside of massage, so I don't know how effective it is without my massage therapist actively pushing on the muscle while also saying, "Good job, you're so strong." That sounds like a nice experience. Sasha says, "Yep, I always thought I was just weak and fucked up. Meanwhile, I am struggling to hold my body together. My connective tissues are not connecting." And it is so wild suddenly becoming aware of that and then being able to feel like when, let's say, your legs are behind your head and there's a body pressing on you, um, your knees like separating a little bit, like, or whatever, or like when I'm doing a push up, like feeling how much my hand is going back too far and straining things around here. When I just before was like, I'm just weak. I'm just wobbling as I'm doing push ups because I'm weak. I need to just keep doing it. I need to build up my forearm strength, I guess. Just always like blaming oneself. Male Valen says the fact that special ed gym exists blows my mind a bit. Where I went to school, gym was so unserious. Yeah, no, it was horrible. It felt very stigmatizing. Special ed gym. Um, didn't like it. I felt really, I as all special ed kids are made to feel, like I felt very othered and like pitied. I was very talked down to. It gets you a lot of negative attention when you get pulled out of one of your regular classes to go do this thing. It was having a little bit of intellectual disability stigma put on me that otherwise I wouldn't have experienced. So I learned some significant stuff from that. But at the time, I just thought, oh my god, people think I'm, you know, an R slur, like I thought in ableist terms, right? And I didn't, and I being ableist didn't want that associated with myself. And it was a lot of like wall push-ups and like having a ruler dropped between my finger or like a yardstick dropped between my fingers and being asked to like catch it to like improve my reaction time, and the whole thing would like fall through. And then going to regular gym as well and being like treated in this very like infantile, insulting way by everybody, which really sucked and did not give me more confidence in my body's ability to do anything or my ability to learn to do physical things. Like I was so alienated from any kind of physical activity or sport or learning something new with my body because what I got from special ed gym was the message that like you're slow, you're weak, you're inept, people are staring at you, people are noticing that there's something different about your body, and none of that felt good. So yeah, and gym was pretty serious. I was getting like a C in gym. Like, I really in high school I was able to um, take college classes at the local college across the street, and I deliberately scheduled it so that I would have it overlap with my gym class, so that then I would be excused from taking gym because I was getting a C in gym in high school, um, and not for lack of trying. It was just like I'm not fast, I'm not strong, I'm not. I can't keep track of what's happening when we're playing basketball or whatever, or dodgeball or whatever. So I'm fucking at risk of getting a bad grade in the class. It's fucked up. Sasha says everybody at the dentist was super nice to me, and my teeth aren't as bad as I thought. But oh my god, latex gloved hands in my mouth, all those tools. I was really struggling with the X-ray thing. Yeah, the X-ray thing where they like put the really big, like sensor in your mouth. The old school ones. They have small. I don't know if it was like the big one or the small one, like the big hunk of metal or like the hard paper one. They both suck, but the paper one is a little smaller and less bad, and some places have it. They had a TV in the room and it was playing like local news, so it was easier to just tune that out and focus on the fact that I was doing something healthy. Delta 8 is awful. It made me more anxious than real weed. That's valid. Oh yeah, Malvalence, I forget that you're not in the United States. I should look around for CBD drinks next time I'm in the US. Yeah. Yeah, here in Chicago we have, Mars Brewery puts out a lot of weed drinks and CBD drinks. There's some kind of like CBD RX. No, that's not the brand. It's something like that. It has like a very like supplement drink kind of branding, it's like white but with these like sleek like bright colors. Like it looks like it's like an energy drink or a vitamin water or something. And that has a lot of different CBDs. Any gas station, um, they'll be selling like weird rolled up joints, vapes of unknown provenance and uh, ingredients and CBD stuff. Delta 8 is really what I first got into with weed because it was just so freely available in like any store rather than just a dispensary. Way cheaper as a result because it didn't have the dispensary tax, and it was less frightening. Like it was less intense. Annika says, I really question how much I might have hypermobility. All my fingertips are double jointed, and when I was a kid, I could easily put my legs behind my head. These days, I have like no flexibility though, but I wonder if it's just from repeated injuries I had. Well, here's the thing: flexibility and hypermobility are not the same. Um, People equate the two. I'm guilty of equating the two because I happen to have both, but a lot of hypermobile people actually have incredibly tense bodies because, as we'll get into in the piece in a few minutes here, your body compensates for the fact that it doesn't have a lot of stability and that it can't really hold itself together at the joints by tensing the muscles. And so that can cause a lack of range of motion over time for a lot of people. Also, hypermobility can happen in any joint independently of others. So you might be, if you can bend, these knuckles back really far, that might be where you're hypermobile and something to be aware of. But if you can't do like this, the freaky arm thing, I'm gonna show the ones that I feel like I can safely show. This just doesn't look abnormal to me, but apparently it is. Um, you there's a test of hypermobility called the Baton score. It's the most kind of widely used and simple one. You can do it at home, and it's just testing each joint. And it's kind of misleading because it does calculate an overall score of how hypermobile you are. But if you were working with like a hypermobility aware like physical therapist or something like that, what they would look at more is just which individual joints are hypermobile and specifically what's the range of motion on each joint on each body part. So like um after my hand injury, this hand got a little bit less range of motion. Can't really tell. It might be kind of back now. A little bit. Yeah, you can see it goes back a little bit less far. So in some ways, the injury helped me, but flexibility is completely different. So whether you can do the splits or things like that, that's not necessarily hypermobility. One that is commonly like related is if you can just bend forward and touch the floor, just by hinging at the hips without like bending your legs or anything, then you're hypermobile in your hips and perhaps your legs, but you could also be doing that because you're flexible. But otherwise, a lot of things are pretty independent. So mayhaps. Uh, Sweet L Giver says, Sweet Hell Giver, my bad, cute name. I found out I had a vitamin B12 deficiency recently and immediately got supplements without overthinking it. Hell yes, getting your body what you need. I'm ADHD and I live alone, so I've learned a lot about taking care of myself, but it's been worth it and I can better communicate my needs now. Yeah, yeah. I know so many people with B12 deficiencies. Um, I don't know if it's a dietary thing or what, but um, a lot, does it give you more energy? Do you feel more energetic? I know that in theory that's what it's supposed to do. But I just always think of Mad Men, where they were told they were getting B12 shots in the office to like help them get like really pull all nighters and get a client, and it was just like meth. It was just like intense stimulants. Welcome, Trilicon. Good to see you. Um, They say a local board game bar used to offer CBD and THC shots in their drinks, but had to stop after recreational legalization. New regulations. Yes, that's. I mean, in what I've seen in Chicago, that's also pretty common. Where once there's money to be made, and there are people put in charge, there's a state body put in charge of keeping track of tax on weed, where weed's being grown and sourced, where it's being sold. Ironically, that can kind of suppress the market for other things outside of that structure because, hey, you're taking some of the money away from the state potentially, and they want that tax money. So, and now they have the means to like enforce it. So I've seen that. But there is here a couple of coffee shops where you can get THC Delta 8 infused drinks, coffee drinks, and like teas and stuff. Oh, it's so fun. That shit gets me so fucked up though. It's like hours long, body high. It's great. Sasha says, yeah, I had no access to a dispensary, so apart from cast parties, I tried Delta 8. Sometimes it was okay, and sometimes it just made me feel awful, so now I don't trust it. The earliest versions of Delta 8 gave me a headache and made me cry to the Snyder cut. Because at first it was like kind of like salvia, store-bought weed, really horrible, tastes bad, feels bad. Um, feels not real, gives you a headache, makes you cry, but during the Snyder Cut, at least for me, which was so embarrassing. But then it got way better really fast for me. Really, like the quality of the product felt like it got a lot better around here. Annika says, good distinction. My hips and ankles used to collapse on me a lot, and my shoulders would pop out sometimes. Yeah, that sounds like hypermobility, just as Sasha said. Sweet Hell Giver says, what you said about gym is so wild to me because in South Africa, PT class, physical training, is just a playtime on a Friday. Nope. No, 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 no. Here in the Midwest United States, we worship football and being able to play competitive sports. Everybody kind of is expected to play competitive sports and be good at them. It's not exclusively a boy thing either. Like it's really kind of a mark of shame to be an uncoordinated girl too. Certainly to be an uncoordinated boy. And you're in gym class in elementary school, I don't know how many periods it is, but in middle school or high school, it's multiple times a week to every day, and you're having to do things like run a mile, play flag football, play basketball, play baseball or softball, and flexibility tests, strength tests, some stuff that's just like supposed to be fun, competitive, but can also be hell for certain people, like dodgeball. So if you're the weird autistic kid, not usually a good time for you. Um, and yeah, and you're seriously graded on it. That was my experience all through school. Was it mattered whether you were good at it, and it was kind of a mark of shame if you weren't. So that sucked, and it really makes you feel like any kid who was fat, disabled, anything like that had a really awful time with it. And it really didn't engender much like belief in your own body or a sense of like movement as fun or expressive or a way to develop skills. It was just awful. It just sucked. Bad. Sasha says, my doctor says I'm borderline on the Baton score, but I do have hypermobility. She still recommends physical therapy. Trilicon says, yeah, that does happen to our hips a lot, and it's likely why we are arthritic in them already. Yeah, yep. That was another fun thing I learned when I was going to hand therapy last year around this time. I have some arthritis coming up in these guys, my typing fingers, my posting fingers, which and you can feel the grit. Like there's a way. My sister's a athletic trainer, so she works with sports athletes, and it's a medical position. So she helps athletes in high schools with injuries, basically. But you can test for arthritis by kind of like, probably don't do this at home, like kind of grinding the joints, and you can kind of feel like grits in there. She can do this thing with people's knees where like their leg is up and she like pushes forward on the knee while it's like laid out and like drags the like cap of the knee forward, and you can just feel the sand and the grit of like rundown bone in your leg, in your knee, to know how much like arthritis you already have. It's pretty disturbing. Sweet Huggiver says, read the B12. I'm feeling massively better. I'm waiting until month end to see if I should add iron too. I had crazy fatigue and the worst brain fog. My paranoia and anxiety were out of control too. That's really interesting that it exacerbated that stuff. Wave Lev, welcome, hello. Says, weren't those called the presidential testing of fitness too in elementary? Yeah, the presidential fitness test. So there was measures of like, could you do like pull-ups? There were even these like peg boards. I don't know how anybody can fucking do this thing, let alone like a child baby. But like, there's these peg boards that you're supposed to hold yourself up by and pull one peg out and put it back in and like lift yourself. I couldn't even hang off the board. Um, couldn't hold myself up at all, like from a hanging position at that time. Your flexibility, which I did really well on. I was always like in like flying colors range there. I think number of push-ups, number of sit-ups, I couldn't do any. That felt awful. Uh, and yeah, and it felt so, and I think it was maybe like an annual thing or like a once a semester thing, and it felt so weighted with importance because it was the presidential fitness test. Um, I don't know if it was something like a precursor to a Michelle Obama, like some other first lady or presidents, like making child fitness, or maybe even like it dated back to like military recruitment times or like the draft of like testing the fitness of the populace or something. But the fact that it was so official, that it was like the president, the federal government is coming in and looking at how strong you are. That's how it felt as a kid. Um, and it was terrible. They were a nightmare. Yes. People crying at dodgeball in the chat. Yep. Awful. Lord Eelhorse, hello, welcome, says, I will say I was very pleased when high school gym class offered an individual fitness section. Then I didn't feel the shame of being bad at team sports. I wish that gym class, because I've thought a lot about it and how much I was not physically active at all as a kid because I didn't ride a bike until really late. I didn't play any sports. I quit sports teams that my parents tried to put me on because I was so bad at it and had a horrible time and thought of myself as so inept that I didn't like being outside. I didn't like being physical. And I think a lot about what would a better type of gym class look like. And I think it would be a lot of like, here's how the body works. Here's how, here's like dance and movement and stretching and a little bit of lifting or strength training. Here's, proper form for something like a push up or a sit up. And here's other ways that you can exercise those parts of your body if you can't do those things. Here's like just trying out all kinds of different sports and movement and expressive stuff like contact improv. I don't know. Um, all that stuff. And how much more empowering that would have been to teach people actual physical skills rather than just measuring whether they're good at a competitive sport. But that's true of so many things in education, right? Like instead of just testing aptitude and rewarding those who appear to naturally have an aptitude or have already had family resources that made it possible for them to do well in a test, like giving people skills that they could use throughout their life and choose to use how they wanted would have been really nice. And it can be done, I'm sure. And I'm sure like in a lot more like um, progressive schools and unschooling communities and things like that, people are probably doing stuff like that. But that was sure. I never learned that. The only reason I got into physical activity was because I had an eating disorder. Um, and then having to work my way through that and still find the positive things that I get out of movement, which it is very helpful for anxiety for me. It is good for hypermobile stuff to stay in motion for me, and try to rebuild a relationship to using my body that was rooted in what feels good and is good for it has been such slow going. It's almost always just been instrumental for me of if I do this, I can make my shoulders look more broad so then I can pass as a man. If I do this thing, I'll be less anxious, rather than any like joy or empowerment in it. And feeling like I have to do this thing for some reason rather than I get to and I enjoy this thing. It's a post World War II thing. I thought that might be the case. Thank you, Trilicon, for confirming that. Sasha says Maintenance Phase has an episode on the presidential fitness test. Ooh, okay. Awesome. I'm going to have to check that out. I don't listen to that regularly. Sweet Hell Giver says, I actually quit basketball in high school because I was fat and I hated being watched while we ran on the court. For some reason, the boys always wanted to tell you they watched you running. Ugh. So gross. So leering. Yeah. Very, very disgusting. Oh, it's the very first episode of Maintenance Phase. Sick. Wave Love says Soviet era Russia had a similar thing. Yeah, it's very militaristic, very nationalistic, I think. Hello, Artistic Bum. Welcome. Sasha says, I liked gym class when we were allowed to just play and weren't being graded at how adept we were at sports. Felt like the athletic kids were encouraged to bully everyone else. I received the kind of like condescending encouragement that is obviously so much better than bullying, but it made me feel just as much shame. I think. Maybe like or close to as much shame as bullying would have felt. A lot of like, oh, you caught the ball, good job, like that kind of thing. Like people estimated me as being so incapable, which was true, but then they infantilized me so much that I never learn to develop any skills, and I felt watched, and it felt horrible. Wavelev says they didn't teach us interoception, mindfulness, somatics, or connecting with nature through activity. Yes. Can you imagine a gym class where like you go hiking? The only useful stuff that I got out of gym class was stuff like drown proofing. We had a pool in my high school, and so we had a whole unit on like inflating your clothes if you find yourself in a body of water very suddenly. We had a test, a 20-minute, I think, test of just floating in the water with your arms like this, like behind you, and your head like this, your body straight up, using as minimal energy as possible to just keep yourself afloat. So not actively swimming or treading the water, but just trying to like survive. If you were in a survival scenario where you had like fallen off of a boat or you had swum out too far and you were stuck somewhere, and that felt very useful. Swimming, I had swimming lessons as a kid. That felt very empowering and useful, and gave me room to play. And that's why, as a high school student, I chose to be a lifeguard. I took the classes to be a lifeguard because that was the one physical activity where throughout my life I'd been taught, here are practical skills. You can just pretend to be a dolphin and swim around once you've learned those skills. Things like diving after like weighted like keys or just like diving weights was fun. It was just a very individual, at your own pace task, and felt very private too, in a way. For the question of the day, Closet Demon says, haven't really learned, more that I've come to terms and am starting to realize what being chronically ill means. It's like I have a cold 24/7 and I have to accept and treat my body accordingly. Yeah. Yeah. Accepting that limitation is big. Have a few people in the comments talking about dysphoria, girls being singled out of activities in gym class, boys bullying people, being forced into gendered locker rooms and having to get naked. That was also something where I did experience some bullying. That was tough. Being watched and commented on. Sweet Hellgiver says, it's so interesting how these oppression structures are always a thinly veiled way of whipping you into an imaginary ideal citizen, according to usually white supremacist ideals that don't exist. And they're instilled in you so young. Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely. This model of the abled person, the ideal man, the ideal worker, all of that. And if you don't meet the standards of that, it's not like you're actually being given tools or help. You're just being measured and evaluated in terms of your value to the state, in terms of productive capacity and ability to do things like military service. Yep. That's what it's all about. All right. So in the interest of time and energy, I am going to open up the piece that I'll be reading today. But please continue sharing in the chat. Sasha says, when my mom and I went swimming practice, my mom always wanted me to do laps with her when I just wanted to dive and play. Yes. Yeah. Just having a spirit of play. Oh my gosh, the sun is crazy right now on me. Damn. Ouch. Painful. Oh, it's still there. Ugh. Hold on. Terrible. Terrible stuff. It's like right where the sun is like coming down right over the building and like going into my face. So it's going to be a little dim in here for a little bit until it passes that horizon. Wavelove says, would love to build upper body arm strength for gender reasons, but chronic pain is preventing. Yeah. There is a trans mask lifting coach, Lifty Boy, BOI, that I've heard some positive things about. I have not tried it, and I've kind of, personally got on my own whole journey with a lot of this stuff of trying really hard for a long time, for years, to really focus on building up my back and shoulders and chest to create a more masculine V shape, which worked. but it also meant that I think I further overdeveloped some of the muscles that my body was already using to compensate for the hypermobility, like my shoulders. Um, and uh, so I had like really tight traps, and and I think just overengaged certain shoulder muscles rather than others. And after my hand injury, I had to really just accept that I was never going to be yoked, and at that point, I was starting to feel pretty dysphoric about it anyway. But to not have control over that stuff is it sucks. And especially when there's so much shame wrapped up in disability, like disability is seen as emasculating, um, because manhood is so associated with strength, even to the degree that like a lot of butch women who are very solidly like woman identified still often feel like the only way they'll be accepted as a gender nonconforming woman is if they are physically strong and kind of delivering some kind of service to people. Um, and so that's very fraught. Obviously, just the base ableism of it is terrible, but there's a lot wrapped up in there. Sweet Hell Giver asks about nudity in the U.S. or Europe, etc. In South Africa, women tend to be quite comfortable being naked around other women in a way I think that would surprise people. Uh, I think in sports locker rooms, there's a kind of performative casualness with nudity. People will do that to kind of flex on each other how comfortable they are. And in reality, I think for the most part, we're really, really, really negative on nudity, and skittish about it. Um, I do one of my very fun gym class actual bullying kind of experiences was being harassed in the women's locker room before swimming or after swimming while we were showering by a girl who just kept calling me a dyke and threatening to beat my ass because I was using her shower, which I kept just saying it's not your shower. And then when she went around telling people afterward that she had beaten my ass, I had to confront her and say, like, no, you didn't. You just said you were going to. And I just stayed there, kept showering. So what's up? But yeah, lots of lots of weird attitudes towards nudity. I think lots of like a lot of times in environments like locker rooms and gym classes and stuff like that. Uh, fitness classes, straight women can be really nude and kind of do whatever, and then there's a lot more policing of queer people, queer women. If you've seen that post that's like straight women hanging out versus lesbians hanging out, and the straight women are like these hyperfemme girls just like tonguing each other, and then the lesbians hanging out are like Tony Soprano and like another Sopranos character, and they're just playing pool. It's kind of like that. Like the norm is like you can be as like gay and nude and expressive and comfortable in your body as you like if you are like a thin white hot straight woman, and then everybody else that's kind of seen as like more perverted, kind of is my read of things. But people should sound off in the chat about their experiences. Closet Demon says, shout out to weak squishy butches. Not biased at all. Oh, yes. Good shit. Good shit. Okay, so the piece we're reading today is at my Substack. As always, drdevonprice.substack.com. It's free to read. All my stuff is always free to read. No paywall and all that stuff. The piece is called Hypermobile Me, Lessons 1 year after a life-changing injury and diagnosis. The cover image for this piece has a bright neon pink background. Longtime watchers of Time Theft Today may recognize this as the fetish pink, the pink that somebody who wrote into our show says they have a fetish for. So I hope they are enjoying that and jerking it. On the left-hand side is a photo of my hand at pretty much the most swollen it was last year. It's a shot of my hand from above, my left hand, and the whole back of the hand is extremely puffy, going into the thumb and first two fingers. And at that point in time, I couldn't move my thumb, and I couldn't really move those first two fingers. On the right-hand side is a photo of my hand at the time of writing. It is not puffy. I can move everything fine. I still have really just wild vascularity. I just have really visible veins, even not being on T. Um, and it's just my hand sitting on this here desk that I'm using right now. And a little bit of Loki's cat bed you can see on the floor in the background. Yeah, the call back to the fetish pink. I love it. It's good shit. So that's the journey I've been on from there to here. 1 year ago, my hand and my life kind of fell apart. The Trump administration was taking office for the second time, and all the trans, queer, diasporic, and disabled people in my life, which make up essentially everyone in my life, were panicking. Though I tried for a long time to be a source of sober political analysis and actionable takeaways, I was panicking too. I saw access to gender affirming care being cut off for minors and trans people with mental illness, immigrants and refugees being driven from their only homes, essential resources being cut off, visions of my friends starving and dying. I felt crushed under their despair, but obligated to be strong. And after years of recommending that others find modest ways to make a local difference and keep their minds clear, I lacked the will to do it myself, or any faith that it would make a difference. I had a new book coming out just a few months in the future, and the obligation to promote it was sour in my mouth. Rolling out my previous book in the middle of the Palestinian genocide had already made me feel disgusted with myself, and I'd turned down or alienated almost every media opportunity. Slinging books struck me as an unacceptable act of self centering, and it felt pointless for me to be passing out advice with this new book on how autistics could build better homes, sex lives, and retirement plans during an incipient massacre. Or so it felt at the time, anyway. But I was still contractually and socially bound to do it. My publisher sending me conference invitations, my friends asking me what I would publish next. I was also taking care of my body in my typical bad ways, attempting to pressurize all my stress by sleeping with my shoulders pressed into my ears and my hands curled up under the full weight of my body, so kind of like that, but face down. I lifted weights aggressively every morning, no matter how much my wrists hurt. I typed away at random drafts and snippets for hours every day to prove to myself that I was still a writer, and there was something I could do, even when I felt powerless. I kept going. That was the thing people always said about me. 4 books in 5 years, a PhD at age 25, a full-time job, and uncountable side hustles. So much to do and say. And then, all at once, it had to stop. On January 12th of 2025, I woke up with an inflamed feeling hand that stung during my morning chest exercises, so like chest presses and push-ups and stuff. But I pushed through the pain and went about my usual day. The discomfort and swelling grew into a prickly heat over the course of that day. And by January 14th, I had a giant hot goo-filled glove at the end of my wrist that sent me running to the emergency room at 4 in the morning. I was unable to bend my thumb or index and middle finger for weeks. A barrage of emergency room visits, x-rays, MRIs, steroid treatments, antibiotic treatments, autoimmune condition tests, cast and wrist splint applications, scheduled then aborted emergency surgeries, orthopedist visits, and hand therapy sessions ensued. A variety of specialists and surgeons threw themselves at the mystery of my hand, intrigued by the challenge and palpably concerned for me. And that's a big part of where my story diverges from most disabled people's stories. My pain was taken very seriously. I had a really strong team assigned to my case who were always taking what I had to say seriously. And a lot of this I can chalk up to being white and thin and having a PhD. That really gets doctors to take you seriously. Having good health insurance through my job also obviously is a massive source of access that most people don't have. And just the quality and attentiveness of the care and how much information they give me and background is just really dramatically different from what most people get. And I wish everybody got it because it really makes these things less scary. It makes you feel like you are collaborating on your healthcare, and it's empowering. And sometimes when you're in a crisis like this, the thing that you need the most is just to feel like people care, and that's not what most disabled people get. There's a link here to my piece from January of last year when I was still freshly in the middle of this stuff. It's called In Hand. There's a lot of comments from a lot of hypermobile people and otherwise injured people. There's some fun x-rays of my hand, or MRI images of my hand during this time. And there's a steady breakdown of each day that things went down. if you're really interested in medical oddities and hearing all the symptoms. And it looks like I need to tweak the dates here because it looks like it actually started on January 9th, not the 12th. Um, so I'm gonna fix that right now. I'm gonna. It, stream watchers have sometimes seen me edit things on the fly because it's Substack, baby. I don't have an editor. I was looking at my photos for this writing this piece. I was sourcing dates based on the dates in photos. And I could have just looked at this dang old piece itself. So that's bad. Um, and it does look like January 12th was when I did start to get to the hospital. So I was off by a couple days there. Oopsies. So I'm going to update that draft just for the sake of my own thoroughness. But yeah, I have a day-by-day breakdown of kind of the first couple of weeks of my hand getting all swollen and messed up. Different emergency rooms that I visited in Chicago and what my experiences were like, the good and the bad there. A little bit about the Baton test. So I'll keep this tab open as we continue to read through my new piece. But if you're really interested in this stuff and you haven't been following the hand saga, as I've been calling it, then you can read all about it there. Sweet Hellgiver says, did you ever feel guilty during this process, Devin? I can imagine it felt odd to go from being booked and busy to focusing on this one thing. It was what I needed to be able to do that. So I kind of found that the crisis helped kind of zero in my attention more. I definitely felt depressed. I spent like a lot of nights just kind of laying around, unable to do anything with my hand and like sad. But once I got injured, that was actually a positive turning point for me. Because I had this thing to focus on. I had this thing that was getting me out of the house. I was very busy, but now I was busy with doctor's appointments and traveling across town and scans and learning about this thing, which I found very intellectually stimulating. As I said, I got the kind of the social care and support that I really needed. My care team was great. All of the nurses and staff at University of Chicago are really great. It's in a side of town at Humboldt Park that is, or Hyde Park, I'm sorry, that is more black, and people are just like culturally, like people talk to each other more. It's just like a more like a friendly area than the north side of Chicago, where you have a lot of white people from the suburbs who are way more frosty with each other and just racist and cold and superficially nice but not genuine. And so like it was just like a nice environment to be in, really good quality care, just making contact with a lot of people just in a day-to-day, just like on the bus walking down the street way, that was like positive. And I had a built-in excuse. I canceled a lot of things, and prior to that injury, I knew I didn't want to be releasing a book and do a full court press of that. I knew I was holding a lot of my friends and loved ones' political stress and trying to feel like I had answers and that I couldn't do it. I felt like I was full to bursting with obligations, but that I had to do all of it. And I also felt really guilty that I wasn't writing a book. You know, I was still writing Substack things, but I was constantly thinking about what I was going to write next and whether I like what my next book was going to be, or if I even had one in me, and not really wanting to do it, but feeling like I had to meet this standard for people. And so once I was injured, it was very relaxing. Um, it clarified things for me. And the same thing happened to me when I got the really bad case of anemia that I talk about in Laziness Does Not Exist. 10 years prior, where my body broke down, and that forced me to do something that I needed to do all along. So the first few days were terribly painful and upsetting, and I worried about the future and whether I would be able to do any of the things that I've always done. Um, it was depressing, and winter's already depressing, but pretty quickly that turned over into relief, and made my life small enough to like focus on, and that was actually really helpful for me. Um, and that's often been how it's worked for me. So I am now very glad that this happened. Very glad it happened, because anytime I felt anything trying to pull me into taking a work gig that I don't want to do, or a voice in my head saying you should be doing this, you should be working on that, I've just told myself like, bitch, do you want a broken hand again? And the answer is no. And so then I don't do it. So it really clarified things for me, and caused me to make a lot of changes in my life. So I was already feeling guilty all the time. I felt guilty all the time before this happened, and I needed my body to break down, um, for me to realize that I couldn't run on guilt all the time. There's also a link in this piece to an Instagram highlight, going through day by day the hand injury stuff. At first, I thought it was carpal tunnel. Then I went to the emergency room. This must have been where I got the date because I think it said January 12th here, but that's not true. MRIs. Again, if you're a body freak or if this is relevant stuff to your own life, you can check out that Instagram highlight and kind of see all that cool stuff. And it was a funny saga. Like, I remember just being really amused at a certain point once doctors were like, "We're gonna do surgery on your hand." No, we're not. Yes, we are. Like, I was just in it, you know. Like a lot of anxious people, I think when I'm in an actual crisis, I can handle it really well. It's when life is just kind of going regularly and I'm worrying about crises that I am not so good. So, yeah. As Wave Love says, injuries of this kind can be opportunities to learn from and connect with the body. Yeah. And that's been my experience. And it was a gift. It put a lot of changes into motion that have me in a much better place in my life. And and able to clear some detritus so that I can think about what do I want life to look like? What do I want life to look like now? So, yeah. Eventually, my team figured out that I had ruptured my FPL tendon, which connects the muscles of the forearm to the thumb, and the injury had somehow become infected and filled with fluid, blocking the rest of my hand from working for a while. There wasn't any single cause that anyone could pinpoint, but when one of my emergency surgeons, because I had multiple days where they were going to cut me open emergency-wise, diagnosed me as just about as hypermobile as a human being can be. Holy shit was his reaction to my bait and score results, seeing me do the test. Everybody agreed that casual abuse of my freakishly bendy body was probably a major factor. And as for the bait and score, here are some of the tests of hypermobility. Don't do this stuff at home unless you have to. Can you bend your pinky more than 90 degrees down? Can you bring your thumb down to your wrist? I will never do that trick again because I was doing that a ton before my injury. Does your elbow bend more than 90 degrees? Can you bend your feet farther back than 90 degrees? And then standing and bending at the hips without bending your legs much, can you touch the ground? And I can do all of those, and there's several others that you can also take. I've also linked here to the Ehlers-Danlos Foundation, Ehlers-Danlos Society, I'm sorry. They're writing about doing the Baton test. Whether your legs kind of lock backward like a flamingo is another one. I have that to death. And they do also talk about a few other tests for assessing hypermobility throughout the body. One's by Nicholson and Chan, 2018. One's from Ferrari et al., 2005, and Meyer et al. For adults. And a lot of those, my hand therapist walked me through some of these, and it really looks at measuring the specific degrees of motion that you have on each body part. So it's a little bit more specific. So if you're curious about that, you can check that out. The hand got better on its own. I just had to heed its insistent uselessness and wait. After all those doctor's appointments, all those tests, it just started getting better on its own. So that became one of the things that surprised my doctor was how at first my doctors were like, "What the hell's wrong with you? We can't figure out what it is." That's fascinating. And then slowly, every time I came back in, my thumb could move a tiny bit more. At first, I could just barely move. Like if I held it firm, I could move the tip of my thumb about like a millimeter or less. But that signaled to my doctors that this tendon wasn't completely ripped. They thought it was like severed, that I didn't even have the tendon, and they would have to like re-sew it or do some kind of replacement, which would have been a really intrusive surgery that would have been hard to come back from. But once they saw that tiny little bit of motion, they knew my hand worked. My hand could work. The tendon existed. And slowly I was able to bend a little bit more and a little bit more until eventually then I could do hand therapy exercises with the rubber band and bring my thumb across my hand. And that is what happened. It's so wild to talk about now because I mostly just remember what I remember of that time is, like, how interesting it was. Like, I remember it as kind of an enjoyable, relaxing time, even though I was obviously also really upset, and wondering if I'd ever be able to type again, um, if I'd be able to do my job. So the hand got better on its own. I just had to do nothing. Then, once I could turn a key or wash a dish, both my hands demanded that I get better at listening to them. So I started noticing what the precursors to an injury felt like. If I held my phone for too long in bed, I'd notice an ominous tweaking kind of pain in my right wrist, my dominant wrist. Push ups were no longer an option. It hurts way too much up in here. I still do them for a little bit sometimes, but usually with wrist wraps, and I have to really pay attention to it. And I pay the price when I do it, so I'm constantly learning the boundaries of whether I should do it at all. When I switched to running, I would sometimes feel a wobbling pain in my ankles or knees, which told me that I had to stop. I started rearranging my workspace, then my life, which inspired a pretty dramatic shift in how I see myself. And that played a role in some ways in stopping testosterone. It was something I already wanted to do. I was already really dysphoric, looking as masculine as I did, but knowing, oh, you're never going to have that masculine body shape and you can't keep following these rules that you've set for yourself every day in terms of lifting weights every day, upper body focused, that kind of helped break the spell. Because when I set a rule for myself or like set a daily habit, I usually stick to it pretty doggedly. And so having a reason to change it was good. Since my diagnosis, I have learned a lot about the needs of my hypermobile body and the state of the science on mine and related conditions such as Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which I currently do not believe that I have. I know that a great many people discovered their own hypermobility or hypermobile EDS through reading my last piece on the subject, and were able to use the comment section to trade a ton of resources. I thought I'd pass on some of the lessons of my first year as an aware, hypermobile person and some of the lessons, accessibility tools, and life hacks that have kept me from injuring myself again, and sometimes even helped me thrive. So the rest of this piece is just a paragraph by paragraph breakdown, bullet points of things I've learned. Sweet Hell Giver says, holy shit, and here I thought I was just really flexible. But I think you did say earlier that there can be overlap between hypermobility and flexibility. They're different things. They are different things. Hypermobility is how much you can extend at a joint. Flexibility is about your tendons. And so they can go together or they don't necessarily go together. A lot of things that get called flexibility are hypermobility. If you can bring your leg up over your head, it's not necessarily because you have flexibility in this tendon. I'm just going to demonstrate it because I'm a weirdo. It could be this tendon on the back of your thigh that's really flexible, or it could be that your hip joint is so hypermobile that you can bring your leg up to like ridiculous places. If your leg bends backward, like in that hypermobility assessment, this is not flexibility. Flexibility is involved in your tendon strength. It's things that you can do in like the back of your thighs, your inner thighs, where a lot of like muscle and tendon development is. If your bones are bending in weird ways, that's not flexibility, that's hypermobility. So if you are bending in a more extreme angle, or if your body yields more to pressure at your wrists, your ankles, your knees, your hips, your shoulders, places like that, your neck, if your head can go farther back or down than other people's, if just a little bit of pressure, like somebody pushing you, can take your arm way back farther, if you can touch all of your back, as I can do, that's not usually flexibility. That's usually your joints are in there. Flexibility a person can develop with exercise and practice. But if you just naturally can do these things, you're probably hypermobile, especially again if it's at the joints. So that's the distinction. They can go together or they can often be not associated with each other. A lot of hypermobile people actually are inflexible in their tendons. They feel a lot of tension in their backs, their legs, a lot of tightness because the muscles and tendons are tensing to hold their body together because they don't have enough of a joint lock, kind of in the connective tissue in the joints. So not necessarily, but it is confusing because people often say flexibility when what they are actually talking about is hypermobility. So there you go. A person can be hypermobile in one joint, some joints, or all the major joints of their body. I happen to be hypermobile as fuck in every joint observed, but some people are only able to hyperextend their elbows or one finger. You can have it on one side, one body part, etc. The more hypermobility your body exhibits, the more likely you are to face complications from it. But everyone with the trait should be cognizant of how it can alter their stride, posture, form during exercises, muscle activation, etc. Hypermobility is also strongly correlated with autism, ADHD, EDS, gastrointestinal disorders, and other conditions, but it can also exist on its own. The world is not built for us. Hypermobility is rarely taken into account by medical providers or physical therapists. There is still relatively little medical awareness of and research into the needs of hypermobile individuals. So doctors are unlikely to detect it and may not know how it affects the entire body system, depending on the doctor. Many are downright hostile to self-diagnosis of hypermobility or view hypermobile patients as hypochondriacal or difficult, especially if you think that you have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which many doctors either don't believe is real, they believe is overdiagnosed, or they associate with demanding patients, people that they think complain too much. And it's like there's just all of this baggage that comes with it, which creates a ton of problems where it's similar to things like autism self-diagnosis, where there aren't a lot of systems in place to help um, with accessing any information about autism if you're an adult, right? Or if you're a woman, a gender minority, a person of color, etc. And so then that means people have to kind of self-advocate or just seek out the limited number of doctors, psychiatrists in that case, who do exist, who will do an assessment. And so one thing that is been very troubling to me as I've been researching hypermobility is that a lot of times the only sources of information are doctors on YouTube who are marketing themselves as a clinic you can go to for a diagnosis and for care. And so there's an incentive structure in there that's not so great, where you're kind of reliant on a handful of people to be your only source of knowledge and validation and resources on this stuff. And a lot of times they are trying to position themselves as like marketing to a very specific population. So that's just something I want to kind of put a marker on for people, that like there's a lot of overlap with like kind of potential like charlatanry or just like really small communities where they're just, you have very limited options for who to work with. And like some of the resources and like really popular like lectures on YouTube about hypermobility are sales pitches for people's clinics, which is not a great feeling. But it's that, you know, talk to a doctor who's sympathetic to you and believes you and is doing some of this ground level research on hypermobility, or it's seeking out care from a doctor that's going to think that they're going to treat you the same way they treat chronic fatigue patients, fibromyalgia patients, people with conditions that they've decided are psychosomatic and fake and that they associate with difficult patients. So not fun, not a good experience. If you are hypermobile, then run-of-the-mill physical therapy programs can often cause injury by pushing you into too much extreme activity with too little focus on form. As we will discuss later, gentle, gradual, properly formed movement with lots of core activation and additional supports such as, you know, knee braces, wrist wraps, etc., are key for healthy movement in hypermobile individuals. Unfortunately, most PT programs assume that increasing mobility and flexibility is useful, when the exact opposite is the case for us. So if you get injured as a hypermobile person, do not just march yourself over to your local Athletico. You have to find a hypermobility competent provider. This is a huge one. I think even more than medical doctors, from what I've been able to research, physical therapy is, when it comes from like a very standardized, like capitalistic, quick dispensation of services kind of Athletico model, it is really unlikely to be a good fit for you if you're hypermobile. And it's similar to what some people have been saying in the Discord. I know a lot of people in this space have post-exertional malaise and POTS and other chronic illnesses and a lot of physical therapy and long COVID period. And a really common experience for a lot of people like that is you go to physical therapy and they say, you're deconditioned, you get so tired and out of breath because you haven't been working out enough. And so then they try to push you to your limit so that they can expand that limit. And then what happens is you have a crash because you have post-exertional malaise, and then you can't, do anything for months, and then your capacity is reduced. So there's a bit of a similarity. It seems like I've talked to Maddie about this a lot of our other show, and some of her experiences with that stuff, and there's a lot of similarities between that and hypermobility, where pushing it too far can cause a lot of injury. Thankfully, my hand therapist at University of Chicago, shout out to Ricardo, Rolando, I'm sorry, was basically straight up saying that he wanted to reduce my flexibility in hand therapy, that he wanted this hand to have less of a range of motion than my other hand because it's like dangerously too flexible, and really going slowly with things is important. So, yeah. Hypermobility is far more common than people realize. Though it is an understudied phenomenon with low medical provider awareness, hypermobility is actually present in between 10 and 30% of the population. So really, really common, more common than autism, depending on what estimates you go by from the community. And it's a pretty expansive definition, so this isn't actually super surprising. Think of all the kids you knew in school who were double jointed. That's hypermobility. Not everyone with hypermobility has severe problems caused by their bendy tendencies, nor are they necessarily hypermobile everywhere or afflicted with something like Ehlers-Danlos, but we all differ from the norm the medical model assumes comes standard with a body, which means we get worse care. It just isn't something that is accounted for or tested for in any kind of rehab program, physical therapy program, or even just things like sports medicine, athletic training. The assumption is that people have a certain amount of stability, and that certain goals are there, when that does not necessarily apply to everyone. The next picture here is a picture, this got the post flagged on Tumblr as not safe for work, even though there's nothing, you can't see anything here. This is totally fine and safe for work. It's my arms tied behind my back in rope from like a year and a half ago, a little bit more than that. And my arms can go really far back, all the way back. Like I said, I can touch anywhere on my back. And that's on hypermobility. Fun little display of that, and something that's just fun to experiment with within reason, in BDSM or, as we'll talk about later, yoga and stuff like that, even though really pushing it to its extreme is not good for you. But there's me tied up and very flexible, or hypermobile. Again, I'm also equating the things. Our bodies effortlessly do freaky things that can cause injury. This is the most obvious revelation of a new hypermobility diagnosis, but I keep making it over and over in new ways. The hand, it turns out, is not meant to fold fully 80 degrees backward at the slightest pressure. It feels completely natural for my entire hand to fall completely backward with just, again, like any contact, like something like arm wrestling someone or just like pushing against something. But that is a hyperextension. So even though your body can do it, it doesn't mean that you should be doing it. And it can really cause damage to tendons over time, which is why I do not do the thumb down to the wrist thing anymore. Here's another fun detail. The neck, in fact, is not supposed to bend backwards into a U shape when you're eating ass. So any amount of pressure, body weight, whatever that you're doing. I even noticed this when I was like home for Christmas, and I was like touching my grandma's hand or my mom's hand, and like they are not hypermobile, and it just didn't go back as far as my hands go, and it just really, I think I was talking to them about hypermobility stuff, and it was just striking that like with people who aren't hypermobile, you just feel a resistance in their body that hypermobile people, if a joint is hypermobile, you just don't necessarily feel. You kind of just collapse under it. Some of my muscles are seriously underdeveloped, and others have overgrown in order to compensate for it. It is common for hypermobile people to lift their arms by tensing our trapezius muscles, part of the nefarious stingray in the back. Big muscle groups tend to overcompensate in a lot of areas for issues or lack of strength and support in hypermobility. So instead of like raising from like other back muscles and shoulder muscles and like delts and stuff to like raise an arm, there's a lot of like, I'm going to do this first and then I'm going to lift my arm. It's really, for me, like super difficult to not naturally do that. This is because we lack sufficient stability in our shoulder joints, and the muscles surrounding the area tense up in order to hold our bodies together. This is a Tumblr post from Craig Hund Est that says, "Disgusting, evil bastard muscle." And it's a picture of the stingray, which kind of goes from the neck down into the shoulders and then down to the mid back in like a little, two triangles put together, kind of, or diamond shape, stingray shape. And generally speaking, and I've read a lot of this stuff on like the hypermobility forums and stuff like that, people tend to overdevelop their large muscles and muscle groups that kind of like hold limbs when what they need is more support like in the sides and core. Core is kind of everything. Core and glutes and stuff like that, all around the body, front and back, are much better for stabilizing than hunching and stingraying. A reblog on this post from Spaghetti Explosion says the stingray, and then Craig Hund Est reblogged it again and added a modified screenshot of a YouTube video by Bin Had Jack Links that it says the stingray has harmed me once more, and it's a 17:55-minute video of calling out the stingray, the problematic stingray. There are dozens of odd compensatory muscle developments like this that happen for us. For example, many hypermobile people have an anterior pelvic tilt because we don't have enough raw core strength to hold up our disconnected feeling, swaying spines. Here's an image of Taylor Swift with all the telltale signs of having a spine that cannot hold itself upright. This is an old picture of Taylor Swift and Connor Kennedy. She was like 21 at the time and he was 17. So if you're into hating people for problematic age gaps, as many people on the Taylor Swift hate subreddits selectively are, at least, then you can also hate her for that. But she has a tilted forward head, what we would now today call tech neck. Her shoulders are kind of curved backward. Her spine is kind of curved forward, and then her pelvis is kind of tilted anteriorly. And Male Valence says in the chat, if I have anterior pelvic tilt, does it mean I'm hypermobile? Haven't noticed anything else. Not necessarily, I don't think. If you don't have any bait and test score stuff, I mean, again, I'm not this kind of doctor, right? But I think a lot of times there are a lot of autistic people, first period, who have anterior pelvic tilt, and autism is also correlated with reduced muscle development. So that also means there's a lot of like adjustments that people make. Valence says my back is very flexible in general. That could be hypermobility then. Like that's not really. I don't think like hypermobility in the spine is super tested for it. I mean my question would be like your core strength, like what your core strength is like, because that is also a really big factor in anterior pelvic tilt. Like if you don't have strong enough, right, by like whatever conventional ableist standards for the body, if you don't have a lot of muscle strength there, then your body may kind of tilt forward or back. However, another thing that is important to know is that a lot of people, especially a lot of women, are condition themselves into anterior pelvic tilt territory because they think that's good posture. They think they're supposed to stick their butt out and kind of like curve their back, and that's not really sustainable. All my life I've had really bad posture, so I've always been kind of reading up on what actually is good posture and being vexed by it, and not wanting to believe that it's real, and then having to learn a lot more about it since my injury, and learning about hypermobility. But a lot of people, what people think is good posture is this incredibly like rigid, overextended thing that like puts the ass back, and that also is an anterior pelvic tilt, which then underdevelops the core, because you're using the wrong muscles, it puts strain on the lower back, all this shit happens. So, not necessarily. Um, there are so many and there are so many posts on the Taylor Swift hate subreddits about her bad posture. So many pictures of her from the Eras tour where hate people who like, they are dedicated to hating her, and it's just a special interest of mine. I love reading these fucking hate subreddits. They're breaking down every little stance that she has during choreography, her interior pelvic tilt, and so on. Evelyn says, I don't think I conditioned myself into it as far as I can tell. Maybe. Seems like I did it naturally. Yeah, so that could be a lot of different things. Like there's a lot of aspects of autistic posture in general, right? Like toe walking. Like a lot of autistic people growing up are toe walkers, and that may be related to hypermobility. Sometimes it just seems to be a texture thing for some people where they don't like feeling all the grits of the floor on their feet, so they just reduce the surface area of how much their foot is contacting the floor. Some of us do it to stim. All kinds of stuff can be a factor in there. So I don't think just having interior pelvic tilt, I don't think it would be fair to say that definitively is a hypermobile thing exclusively, but it is. If you don't have enough support in your back and core area, then it's pretty common. VNO says, "Oh my god, my knees do that." Welcome, VNO. Coworker at my job says, where I stand a lot, calls them grasshopper legs. Oh yeah, you talking about this? Talking about the bait and score knee, or like bending a knee? I'm doing it right now where I have one leg like bent and propped up against the other leg as I'm standing. Shrimp. I guess this is more like I said shrimp, but I mean flamingo. Flamingo leg. So, yeah, there's a lot of reasons why this stuff can happen. Because hypermobile people have less physical stability and a greater range of motion at our joints than other people do, we have to put care into developing our core and stabilizing muscles, as we've been talking about. Focusing on the abs, lower back, quads, deltoids, and triceps, which this one was surprising to me. The triceps actually do a lot more in posture than you would really think, certainly than I thought anyway, are really key, so that you're not overcompensating with some of those other large muscle groups. At the same time, it's important to not overexercise or strain our joints with too much repetitive movement or weight. Intensive strength training is really dicey for us, particularly anything that puts a ton of stress on the knees, like powerlifting, or in my case, the wrists, like push-ups or chest presses, any of those kind of, personally for me, anything that like tilts the wrist back, so also like a lot of like shoulder presses and stuff like that. In general, it's generally best to focus on forms of exercise that are less showy and punishing. Pilates and slow, careful movement like Tai Chi come highly recommended in the hypermobile community. They build strength in those essential core muscles that help hold the body up and carry it around safely. And they emphasize positioning the body into a correct, safe posture, which again does not usually come naturally to us because we're usually wobbling around or tightening up. And because they are slow and focused on form, you just are more likely to be activating those core muscles that you need. But another thing that's really fun is being autistic. A lot of us aren't the most like naturally skillful at like body mirroring or proprioception, awareness of where the body is in space, or the kinesthetic sense of like where your body is or how your body is in motion. So I find I really have to like watch how other people move their bodies and emulate it if I want to avoid injury, because what just feels natural for my body isn't going to be what the rest of the body parts have evolved to actually do. Wave Lev recommends Blogilates weightless arms workouts. Oh hell yeah! There's a YouTube channel I follow called Anabolic Alien, who's this very adorable Boston man, very like flamboyant, but I think straight, Boston man who has these like 10-minute arm exercise like arm and shoulder weightless workouts that are literally just like a lot of like hand flapping like this for like really long periods of time, and you do get a nice fucking burn from it. And you're not you're not lifting weights, so you're not like putting as much strain on any joints really, and like it feels really good for the back. So shout out to Anabolic Alien also for that. Artistic Bum says I can do all the bait and test things except touch the floor because of over tight muscles. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, and like there's definitely like in the literature some debate about how useful the bait and test even really is, just because it like doesn't give you enough specificity about the range of motion in what place. So it's definitely not like definitive that if you don't have a high enough bait and test score result, you're not hypermobile. Like even thinking of it as a binary is so unhelpful, actually, which I'm guilty of here in this piece, because we really probably should be talking about just each individual joint and its range of motion, and like where a person needs stability in their body. And that's part of what gets confusing with saying like 10 to 30% of people have hypermobility. It's like in what joints and in what ways does it affect them? Yoga and stretching can be risky for us. I'm still having a hard time accepting this one because, as a physically weak, uncoordinated person who felt immense shame at being placed in special education gym as a child, flexibility and mobility were some of the only areas where I ever shined. And again, hypermobility and flexibility are not the same thing, but in my case, I have both. When I bend forward and touch my nose to the ground with my legs splayed out wide in front of me, I can make far fitter, more dedicated athletes gasp. I used to go to this nude men's yoga class. It's been a bit. It used to feel fucking incredible to roll up to the nude men's yoga class and effortlessly stunt on everybody with zero practice, especially because like yogis can be such like divas about that stuff. So it felt like healing the special ed gym shame to be good at something. But when we push our bodies into an extreme stretch, we increase the chance of tearing or rupturing a tendon, just as I did with my hand. Even worse, our bodies actually tense up when we extend ourselves too far, and so for us, stretching can actually have the paradoxical effect of making tightness and discomfort worse. Here's a video explaining why flexibility exercises can do us so much damage and what to do instead. This is a really great channel that I discovered that kind of unpacks the mechanics behind a lot of this stuff. They're called Movement Reborn. It's a relatively smallish YouTube channel, but in his videos, he talks about why if you feel a lot of muscle tightness and you're hypermobile, your first instinct might be to go to a yoga class, to stretch it out, to do things like that. But what you're actually doing is you're putting so much strain on those joints that your body is going to overcompensate and tighten up and make things worse. And so he really talks about how trying to expand your flexibility really isn't the solution, because it's just going to worsen a lot of that. And instead, what you need to work on is stabilization. So, for example, when I think of stabilization, I think of like if I'm doing like a lunge, let's say like a backward lunge, my knees want to wobble and like turn in so much. Like it doesn't feel stable. And that's not from a lack of strength in like the quads or like the large muscles in the leg. It's because of the knee hypermobility. And so like he has a bunch of different videos walking through a bunch of different body areas where there is hypermobility and how it affects exercise and movement, and just talking about like here's how to activate this part of your glute or your core to kind of like tighten up and stabilize where your knee is. And that kind of stuff is actually, if you strengthen some of those smaller muscles, you're actually going to see less pain. So really, really cool. It just really kind of unpacks a lot of the stuff that's not as intuitive if you're operating from like the standard script that's given to non-hypermobile people. So really, really recommend Movement Reborn. Like I found those videos very helpful. And this video especially, why stretching doesn't work, it just explains the mechanics of what's going on with hypermobility and how it affects the body system so well. And it's like a little 7-minute video. So it's dope. I have to stop doing those cute little double jointed party tricks. I already talked about this a little bit verbally, but I used to think it was so fucking cool that I could bring the back of my thumb all the way down to the front of my forearm and press them against one another. But showing off this freaky feature of my body probably contributed to my hand injury. Because I only had discovered that I could do that like a few months. Well, like 9 months before my injury. And so then I was showing it off all the time. So in a very real way, I was cranking that shit into potential injury, perhaps. The orthopedist who diagnosed me as hypermobile cautioned me to never show off any of my body's more extreme capabilities ever again. And as I already mentioned, my hand therapist told me that I should be aiming to have far less range of motion. So, I already did this one on stream, my bad. No more showing off that I can touch every single part of my back with a flat palm. That one doesn't hurt, though. I feel like I can get away with that one. I'm arguing with my past self here. Or hyperextending my elbows into a convex curve. It may look gross and fun, but it causes damage. Again, I've already violated some of the rules here in this video to kind of display things. Those are ones that don't necessarily hurt me as much, but I do feel like if I do the arm thing, I do feel a little bit of a strain on the inside of my elbow. And certainly any hand stuff, doing any extreme hand stuff definitely feels some type of way. So not good to do. Moving almost always feels better than standing still. My hypermobility has provided yet another explanation for my being an eloping, fidgety, exercise bulimic for all my life. So not staying still. Because hypermobile people feel weak and unsupported in our ankles, knees, hips, spines, shoulders, and necks at all, we find it uncomfortable to stand or sit in place. Again, it's those core stabilization muscles. Other people are able to passively activate enough muscle support to keep themselves standing strong, but not painfully rigid. We wind up wiggling and jostling around, leaning against surfaces, or clenching our bodies when we have to stay in place. So you'll see in hypermobile people a ton more leaning on surfaces, leaning forward, leaning against a post or a wall while like waiting for the train, standing like the flamingo thing that I already mentioned, leaning against your body, holding your own body to kind of hold it up, collapsing, curling up on the couch like a cat. All of these things, whether it's seeking stability from the floor, your own body, or a surface, it's seeking stability. It's trying to keep the body from kind of collapsing and holding it up. And there's just a lot of small muscle activation for other people that kind of helps make it pretty easy to just do those things because not because their muscles are inherently stronger, but because they don't have to have those muscles compensate for their joints not working and not having the connective tissue the joints typically need to have. VNO says, is that not normal, touching your back? Everybody can do that, right? No, definitely not. A lot of people can't touch much of their back at all. But as Annika Transpeak says, I think it specifies touching every part of your back with a flat hand. That's really extreme. Like if you can lotion your whole back, you might be hypermobile if you can do that. There are a lot of variables there, though, like body size. Thinner people, it's going to be easier to do that because you just have less width. But if you can kind of cover the whole territory, that's pretty often your shoulder and your wrists are, and maybe even your elbows too, are kind of bending in a bunch of different directions to make that possible. So, yes. It normal, of course, is a fraught phrase, but most adults can't do that. I'll say that. But it's a lot easier for us to utilize the muscles our bodies need for support when we are moving. Walking, shifting weight from one foot to the other, bouncing on tiptoes, toe walking, rocking in place, a lot of very like stereotypically autistic, stimmy movement behaviors can feel a lot more secure to us than staying still. Again, because you have that muscle activation and you don't have the joints carrying your body weight. Your joints are just kind of moving through the body movement that like muscles are taking control over. So right here, I'm at a standing desk. I'm moving around a lot more than I would be generally like standing still, and that feels a lot better. And even just like at, a concert, waiting for the bus, some place where you're like standing for a long time, like movement and swaying feels a lot better. Says, I'm listening, I'm learning, nods sagely. Yes. Yeah. And again, I'm no sage here either because I just just started learning about this stuff and this literature in the last year myself. It's also generally pretty therapeutic for hypermobile people to switch sitting or standing positions many times throughout the day. Um, I've been researching the desk setups and trying to find the one this whole year. And the answer seems to really be that there is no one, there is no optimal ergonomics for hypermobility so much as a variety, giving your body a variety and not overdoing it. So if you're hypermobile, having a single workstation is probably not going to be a good fit. Most people on the hypermobility subreddit report switching between multiple positions, so things like alternating between a chair and an exercise ball, curling up at a floor desk, which I'd really like to try. A lot of people lay supine on a couch with their work in their lap or in a bed. A lot of people work from the bed, or have some variety of like moving through those different stations, because again, you just don't have enough core support or like small muscle activation to kind of hold your body together. So any position that you're in statically is like a strain on those joints more than other people. Transpeak says, I love my sitting in the floor desk. So many sit positions. Oh shit, yeah. I've really wanted to get like a Japanese style kotsatsu. Right? Is that what it's called? Which is like a heated table thing before, like as a workstation, just, non-Western style furniture where it's more normalized to kind of like be all snuggled up on the floor. Feels so comfortable to me, but unfortunately when you just live in the West and most people's bodies are not used to that kind of thing, it doesn't really feel fair to ask people to like sit on the floor with you in your home. But this katsatsu is a heated table. For those who can't see, it's a low to the ground table with a comforter built into the table and a heater underneath. So you can just curl up under it in the winter and just like sit at it and use it as a workstation, take meals there, use it as a primary heat source throughout the day. That kind of stuff is so fun. Annika says floor desk with lots of pillows is top tier. I have a topper for a normal desk that is supposed to make it a stand-up desk, but I just use it on the floor. Oh, and height adjustable. Oh, okay, yes. So the thing that people just put on top to make a standing desk, you just put on the floor. That's smart. That is really that's clever. If you want to post pictures of your workstation in the Piscord, I would love to see that, or anybody who has like has a setup for hypermobility, let me know because I would love to see that stuff. And continue to experiment with it myself. Though for me, the answer really is also just less time at the cursed computer. It's just evil. Being at the computer is evil. A diversity of gentle exercises is essential. Movement is good and strengthening exercises are beneficial, but it is very, very easy for us hypermobile people to take things too far. After years of devoted strength training, my hand injury provoked me to get into gentle flow exercises, then to take up running and biking. Most people in the community and most hypermobile competent care providers would caution against running. It shoots a lot of force right into some of the body's most vulnerable joints, such as the knees. But I have strong legs and a lot of anxious demons to outrun, and I found that working more cardio into my repertoire is helping me learn how to breathe correctly. Because as it turns out, I also have learned in the past year, since my hypermobility diagnosis, that I've been holding my breath basically anytime I'm at the cursed computer, any place with the evil screen. Many people hold their breath and don't take full breaths while they're at the computer or at a screen, but especially if you have any of these other body things. And failing to engage my diaphragm for like perhaps my whole life. Maybe at least since I started trying to manually lower my voice for gender affirming reasons. Definitely started breathing wrong then. We've talked about this on streams before for people who are curious in the archive. All of this is also a pretty common consequence of hypermobility and autism. And I've linked to a few sources from some EDS groups and EDS researchers and writers about how a lack of core support also means that you're holding your body in a weird way, which means it's harder to expand your lungs. And so then you're taking shallower breaths, and it's all connected. And so that can cause problems. And also, uh, there's a lot of reasons why people who are autistic tend to take shallower breaths from like stress and just like, just stress and sensory activation all the time, putting you into like low key fight or flight mode all the time, to just having less muscle development and stuff like that. I also feel a powerful need to exercise that is pretty hard to reason with. So for me, rotating between a dumbbell, a kettlebell, a resistance band, cardio exercise, now Pilates, just like trying out a bunch of different things, allows me to burn off stress while still listening to the little tweaks and pains of my body. So a lot of the people on the hypermobility subreddits really say like just take it ridiculously easy, only work out a couple days a week, move at your own pace. I think the key takeaway though is that learning to listen to your body and to change what some of your goals are. So for me, like reorienting from like I need to be like muscular Dorito chip man, or like I need to do strength training to like I just need to do something that's gonna make my body hurt less and like just kind of give me some of the benefits of exercise is like was like a good reorientation. Any kind of repetitive movement or pressure can cause injury. This past summer, I had the opportunity to walk in the Chicago Pride Parade with a local puppy play group, and I happily donned my mask and waved my paws at strangers like this. It was really fun. But immediately after the parade, I felt a straining sensation in my wrists. I was doing both my paws. I was very excited. And I was in too much pain as a result to write emails or type on my phone at all the next day. And I still felt it like into the next couple days. So I ended up choosing to take an entire week off from any writing. And like really, really minimal like computer work. Almost everything was like voice to text. And that's all because I spent 2 hours waving my paws nonstop like that. Uh, Here's a picture of me at the Pride Parade last year with my paws in paw position, shirtless, leather harness on, little leather puppy mask on. I cropped out one of the other pups that I took a picture with just because didn't have their permission. Yeah, it was very fun, but like any amount of like push-ups, any kind of like upper body strength training, typing, writing, holding my phone, all of that stuff was kind of like off the table mostly for a few days just because used my I used my wrist too much, like excitedly stimming at people for like an hour and a half or something. Now that I know what the precursor to a tendon injury feels like, I notice all kinds of activities that can cause strain. If I spend too much time flicking Pokeballs in Pokemon Go without a break, I can injure my thumb. If I have a lot of sex that involves putting my ankles behind my head, I can feel my knees shifting apart a little bit. Opening jars, carrying boxes, bending too far forward or backward, anything extreme can hurt me if I don't pay attention to that kind of stretchy, achy feeling in my joints and seek out either rest, so not doing the thing anymore, or physical support, putting on a brace or something like that. Um, and it's a really specific sensation. Other people in the chat who are hypermobile, maybe you can also describe what it feels like for you if you know what I'm talking about. It's a type of pain that I've just always pushed through and ignored until things got to the point where I couldn't anymore. But it's like this kind of strained, achy, tweaked feeling. Like I always want to call it like it feels tweaked. Um, and that was just what I always pushed through. And that was how it felt the day that my hand got really bad. Just a more extreme version of that. Braces, compression wraps, and elastic bands are a godsend. When my knee started to feel like it was separating due to too much running and leg bendy sex, I started wearing a knee brace throughout my day or like as needed or while running, whatever, and stopped using my standing desk for a while. The gentle pressure the brace put on the joint felt amazing, and it was suddenly far easier for me to walk in a smooth, controlled way. This was fairly crazy to me that, like, if you have hypermobile joints, you probably are hyperextending even as you walk, and so walking can feel more exhausting because you are like having to like hinge and unhinge, lock and unlock your knee if you're like letting your body do that. So for me, like when I have like a knee brace on, like I feel more like springy and supported walking and like I'm actually using the leg muscles, which is pretty wild. I was so used to my body jolting and popping that I hadn't realized it wasn't supposed to be exhausting and painful to walk. I thought, is this what having typical mobility is like? And it turns out that it probably is. This image is just a few little braces and stuff that one can use. Um, Knee brace, wrist brace, ankle wraps, and for whatever reason, I also find like hip bands that you use for like certain like thigh and like glute exercises. That just like go around like above your knees and you do like leg exercises with them. Like the support that gives, the pressure around the knees while doing like squats or something feels so good. So if you have hypermobile bendy knees and you're trying to work on your quad strength, I I in my experience, it's been really helpful. Like even though the resistance band is also adding in theory like more, making it more difficult, um, and putting more like load on your thighs, it's also like if you bring it down, like it's kind of stabilizing your knees and it's kind of putting the load where it needs to be on those muscles instead of on the joints. So chef's kiss, good shit, good shit. I have also gotten into the habit of using ace bandages on my wrists when I lift weights, and sometimes wrapping my ankles before running, though I should do it more often. I find that slipping on an elastic brace, with a Velcro or hook closure is a lot easier than taking the time to bandage my body, and it stays in place better, so I can enjoy the stabilization all day. As I already just said verbally, I also really like wearing an elastic hip band around my hips, even when I am not exercising. It gives me a gentle pressure that makes sitting or lifting things far more comfortable. There are also custom accessibility tools designed to support hypermobile people's bodies, such as the Body Braid. And that's just something that I'd really like to test out. They're like $100, I think. It looks like an absolute feast of positive sensory input and supportive pressure. Here is a picture from the Body Braid website. Not SpawnCon. We'll never do sponsored content, but just to talk about it, it has some elastic support. So it's all elastic that goes around the body. It has kind of an X that goes across the shoulders and mid back, and then another X that kind of cuts across the waist and along the thighs. We can look at a video from the front here. It kind of curves around to the knees, and also from the front goes across the shoulders and across the front of the thighs. So it's supporting a lot of those areas of wobbliness. Um, So it's intriguing to me. It does seem like it's providing support in a lot of the right places. It looks like there's some body braids that also have some ankle support. So if I get one of these, I'll report back on my experience with it because it does look very supportive and comfy and like positive pressure that feels very stimmy and fun too. VNO says, if I go off HRT, my body doesn't produce hardly any sex hormones, but I do sometimes have to go off HRT for money and medical reasons. I absolutely notice that my joints hurt regularly and don't get better quickly until I can get back on my meds. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, especially if you have like a deficit of sex hormones off of HRT. That that's interesting. Transpeak says, I love corsets for posture support. Yes, yeah, people like have that bad, like, ahistorical feminist take that like corsets were like this horrible restrictive thing um, for women, which tight lacing was, right? Like making people make their waist as small as possible was bad. But like posture support from a corset can be positive if you need it, or if you're not like deconditioning the muscles from using it all the time. Um, I love a posture collar, like those big ones that like it's one of the only things that can really push my shoulders down. Um, and then I do know a few hypermobile people like Blorbo of the show, Chicago Janiza on Tumblr, who sleeps with a neck brace on. Um, and I know a few hypermobile people actually that sleep with neck braces on, which seems like a pretty wise idea. VNO says that big brace looks so rad. Yeah, doesn't it just look so supportive? It looks so cozy. Um, so I might pull the trigger and get me one. Oh, it's $185. So it's a little bit more. It's fairly expensive, but if it works, it would be very lovely. And it looks like they are going to start making separate leg and arm ones, which probably seems good for for like a size accessibility perspective. Closet Demon says the bad posture hypermobility to historical dress obsession pipeline is real. Yeah, yeah, that's some real shit you just said. Um, thinking about it, well, uh, autism to historical dress obsession pipeline is so real. I don't think I've known anybody who's ever said I want to wear old Victorian clothes in public who didn't have an autism. Like that's so there. And also like the layers of like supportive like fabrics, the like under layers and like hidden pockets and like replaceable like underskirts where that's the only part of the outfit that actually gets dirty so you can just swap it out, like the modularity of historical dress, like it's so autism. It's so good. Wave Lev says, "Gotta go. Thanks, Piscord peeps, for being here, and Devin for bringing us together. It makes life better." Oh, thank you for being here. Thanks for chatting throughout, everyone. Actually, while I'm here, let me do a quick screen switch and do a little Piscord invite link in the chat, just because I've been talking about it. So for people who don't know, the Piscord is a Discord server that started for me and Maddie's show Time Theft Today. And it's really blossomed into what actually feels like a community. I always cringe when internet people talk about having communities because it's usually a very just marketing a parasocial attachment for money. And I didn't want to have a Discord server at first, but a lot of people in the chat were interacting and kind of wanted it, and it has blossomed into a really nice place that is full of people talking at their own pace about. There's crafting groups, people just get on voice chat and like do crafts or productivity tasks together. There's lots of medical self-advocacy stuff happening in the chat, people sharing crafts that they're working on, all kinds of cute stuff. And so and I'm like barely on it, so it doesn't feel like a weird cult, which was always my fear. So if you like these streams and you want to participate in the Piscord chat, you can join the server. I'm going to put the link in the chat, all kinds of cute for stuff. People. And if you're watching the YouTube VOD after the fact, if you can see it doesn't feel like a weird cult. The Discord link, text, and type it up, you are welcome to join. I just don't put it in any video descriptions because I don't want alt-right chuds to like brigade us or anything, which thankfully we've never really had too much of an issue with. We've had one or two Zionists that we've had to boot out, but other than that, we've had a good experience. All right. Back to my screen share. Boop. We're moving at such a good pace today. Oh, you hear echo? It's because I had my YouTube open. Sorry about that. The audio from my own YouTube version of my stream was echoing there. Sorry about that, Closet Demon. I finally understand a lot of my pressure and stability-seeking behaviors. Before I knew I was hypermobile, I assumed my tendency to sit with my knees pressed to my chest was purely an autistic search for stimulation. I also tend to cross my arms, hold up my own hands by the wrists, or throw my legs over armchairs, prop my lower body up against a wall with my head tilted downward, cross my legs, and lean against things. This once got me evaluated as too casual and cocky during a job interview. Now I understand that I'm not only a disrespectful and pressure-loving freak, though I certainly am those things too. I have a body that takes way more energy to hold up than most, so I instinctively find support wherever I can get it. That is a beautiful thing. I am happy that my body has done what it needed to be more comfortable. Instead of being ashamed of my weird posture or my supposed physical weakness, I can see now that simply existing in my body is a more demanding task than most people can understand or experience. That means I might need more rest and more help, at least in certain areas. Hopefully the echo is gone now that I've closed the tab, but let me know. Our bodies can relax too much. Another fun paradoxical effect of hypermobility is our tendency to physically collapse in on ourselves when resting, causing our joints to inappropriately sag in the wrong direction. So you can think again about like the knees hyperextending backward, kind of like that, just or just kind of folding in on yourself when you're sleeping. We can also become too limp and still when doing something like chilling out on the couch. Um, I notice this a lot more when I'm high. I might just be more aware of it. Um, so being too still for too long in a collapsed posture can all cause muscle discomfort. Did you know that the average person should be activating their core and back muscles a bit while they sleep, and that it's normal to shift your weight an almost imperceptible amount even during relaxation? I didn't. I just fall in, if I'm trying to like actually relax, I just fall into a heap of bones and rely upon the couch or mattress to ground me, the way that a cat does when it's curled up, using kind of the floor to stabilize itself. But that shit can hurt. To keep their sagging joints lifted and support the weight of their heads or bodies, many hypermobile people sleep in a nest of squishmallow stuffed toys or use a pregnancy pillow. This is from a TikTok video. Of course, it's TikTok, so everything's like a Temu link advertisement, but a lot of people do swear by these things. This is a user on TikTok called ADHD Former Teacher, in a video demonstrating themselves curled around a pregnancy pillow. So, do I have a link to a pregnancy pillow here? Let me just pull up an image, just for clarity's sake. So, a pregnancy pillow is kind of like almost a horseshoe shape kind of thing, like a it has two sides to it, and one side curves under, and your body goes in the middle. And in this image, ADHD Former Teacher, she's on her side, has one leg thrown over the pregnancy pillow, resting and giving some stability to the hips, another leg underneath, similar to putting a pillow between your legs. Their head is kind of nestled at the top of the pillow and has some support, but their shoulder can go underneath, so they don't have like the shrimpy shrug. And then their arms can wrap around the curve of the pillow and hug onto that. So again, that can give you some arm support and some arm lift. And then there's some gentle pressure on the back from the other side of the pillow, which is nice. And in this picture, they also have a really cute little tuxedo cat here. And they're answering an ask about which pregnancy pillow they use. Just a little demo of what that can look like. Vienna in the chat says, the za got me moving like an over easy egg. So like wobbling. That Zaza got you jiggling. I don't know about you. That Zaza got me like locking up, like a scared rabbit. But that's me. Annika Transpeak says, do you know about the pregnancy pillow date thing? TLDR, a trans woman had a pregnancy pillow, and her cis date got offended because she thought she was trying to get her pregnant. Oh my god. What kind of like... The people are wanting the Anna Valens cock carousel trans woman forced impreg fantasy to be real so that they can be afraid of it. Whereas others among us are wanting it to be real because it would be hot. Like, what the fuck kind of weird, like, predatory lesbian trans misogynistic fucking stereotype would you have to have living in your mind that a trans woman having a pregnancy pillow makes you think she's gonna impregnate you? What the Jesus Christ. No, I think I missed that one, but wonders never cease. Like, trans misogynists, like, they make up the fucking wildest shit. Like, do you remember the quesadilla thing? The trans women can't make quesadillas. Like I know you're not really a woman because you asked how quesadillas are made or whatever. That fucking shit. Like, it's always these Tumblr monsters. Ugh. Yeah. No, I don't think I saw that one, or I forgot. Sasha says, it's a pillow for her. It's her pillow. Yeah, what, like, Does this cis woman think that you use a pregnancy pillow to get someone pregnant? Like, what the fuck? Oh, so stupid. Yeah, quesadilla shit was so fucked up. Closet Demon says, trying to hold my neck up while lounging is so awful. Also, I have 8 off-brand Squishmallows to hold my poor body while I sleep. Yes, again, if you're in the Piscord and you want to share your sleep setups, like your how you arrange the Squishmallows, everybody on the hypermobility subreddits are always talking about using the Squishmallows, but I'm really only still just starting to experiment with it. Like I don't know what to do with my shit, dog. Like, so if you have a good setup and you feel comfortable sharing a picture of like how you arrange yourself or like where you put the Squishmallows, I would love to see. I'm curious because I've been like experimenting with like, oh, like having something under my arm, like holding my arm up. Like, do my shoulders need to be like supported as well as my head? Like all kinds of stuff. So let me know if you feel like sharing. And for people curious about the pregnancy pillow transmisogyny thing, there is a link in the chat from Transpeaks. If you like getting mad. Learning how to sleep on my back with proper neck support has dramatically reduced my back pain and improved my posture. All my life, I have slept in a painful, face-down, curled-up position, with one leg thrown out to the side and bent to ground my slipping hips, and usually my arms folded underneath me, often with the wrists bent inward, hence my wrist injury. At rest, I have looked more like an oddity at an archaeological site than a living human. And here we have a skeleton all curled up, arms kind of nestled, and spine just in the back of the skull, just fully hunched. Somebody in the comments on this post also called it the Yamcha pose from Dragon Ball Z. So when he like hit the ground and his legs are curled up, also highly accurate. This sleeping posture filled my trapezius muscles with thick knots, kept my shoulders permanently tensed and risen, all things that are already problems, and hurt basically every joint that I had curled inward. I do really think that was something that lit the fuse for my hand injury, because I think I cranked it under my body. But getting myself out of the habit of sleeping this way has felt absolutely impossible, because my body craved so much pressure. I even slept face down like this right after top surgery, when the front of my body was stitched together and still filled with tubes. You're really supposed to sleep on your back during top surgery, and I did not, except for maybe like 1 or 2 days. The game changer for me was a recent stay in my sister's guest room, which her autistic girlfriend had styled up into the perfect cozy age regression chamber. A high-walled couch with firm foam stuffing, emotionally soothing fairy lights and toys on display, fuzzy but substantially weighted fleece blankets, and like tons of them, and a huge pile of stuffed animals I could prop my head on and surround my body with. Here's a picture of the little cozy Squishmallow nest that I had just for sleeping on a couch. It just was fabulous for me. It's smaller when I enlarge it. This little like kind of maroon mauve Squishmallow, I think it's like a bird or something, that's where my head would go, and I would just kind of surround myself with some of these other little guys, little bears and things, and plague doctors and stuff, and like cover myself with blankets and like lay on my back, and it ruled. Like, I had no shoulder pain on this setup. Annika says, I posted the floor desk in biohacking. You have permission to show it on stream if you want. Okay, awesome, thank you. I might pull that up in a second. In this setup, I was able to sleep on my back with just a thin Squishmallow supporting my head and neck, and my arms relaxed at my sides. I was really kind of like pulling them down to my sides, with my shoulders down and as far away from my ears as possible. The weight of the blankets on top of me provided the front of my body with the pressure I was used to getting from pushing my face and torso into the mattress. The stuffed animals on the side gave me the sensation of being contained, which helped create kind of the illusion of sleeping on on your side. So when I really wanted to curl up and sleep on my side, I just kind of tricked myself into thinking that I was by just rotating my head and like kind of burying myself against the stuffed animals into one of their fluffy bodies. So that was nice. That was good enough that like I actually could start falling asleep on my back, which now I do some of the time, and it does help. It has been fucking fantastic. Every single night that I have slept like this, I have felt completely relaxed and supported, woken up with zero back pain, and have been able to go about my day with none of the usual shoulder tension. And I have found the setup relatively easy to replicate at home with my Pokemons. Also, Loki's sleeping here. Can y'all see Loki right now? Probably not. Let me do a little Loki check. The girl, the woman. Let me do a big one. There's the woman. She's asleep. My baby. Fixing my posture is very important, I've learned, which sucks. And I did not want big posture to be right. This pisses me off so much that posture is real. I really thought it was ableism and autism phobia, that people had an idea of good posture. That like, oh, it just makes you look more attentive and like confident and strong. Fuck that. Who cares? Unfortunately, it's true. People in the chat said her, Kitty, her excellency, her stupidity. Oh, she's so good. Figuring out my hypermobility has meant waging war on every little thoughtless bodily habit that causes me untold tension and pain. I have always kept my arms really high up and curled up against my body in a little squirrely position. I'm already doing it right now. This looks adorable and gay and feels secure, but it pulls my shoulders forward and up, causing back and neck problems while worsening my posture. One really easy hack that I've recently discovered is that I can force my arms and shoulders down into a more correct posture by jamming my hands into my pants pockets. Zoomer gigantic jeans win again. Like having enough, low enough, big enough pockets. Just putting that shit in the pocket just is like a nice little check of like, okay, bring those shoulders down a little bit. Coat pockets are too high up, in my experience, and cause me to bend my arms forward at the elbows and scrunch my neck forward. But pants pockets are lower and require me to elongate my arms. In addition, the pressure of the jean fabric also keeps my arm in place, as swaying them when I walk often feels too uncomfortable. And Annika says, does this mean the anti-shrimp check is done? Oh yeah, the make your posture worse redeem. Well, I haven't had it turned on since we moved from Twitch, so it might be done. It might actually be a posture check. Isn't that horrible? Then I might add just a posture check button that people can hit. But if it's the right thing to do, if it's the right thing to model. So we used to have on these streams a redeem people could do that would tell me and Maddie to make our posture worse. Mostly me, I think. Shrimp check. But I don't know. Maybe shrimp check isn't coming back. That shit hurted. Also related to posture, I also recently took the arms off my desk chair. Trying to rest my arms on them caused my whole upper body to tense up and made my workday massively uncomfortable. I'm having to take away every opportunity to hunch. So trying not to lean forward on tables. No more sitting in shitty chairs with a lack of lower back support. If I feel myself folding forward into the gargoyle, TM, especially at my desk, I try to engage my ass muscles, curl my tailbone inward and down, drop my shoulders, and this is, I think, an important one. Take a deep breath into a gentle raising of my chest. Like actually breathing and moving your body is really helpful for this stuff because like posture shouldn't be like super rigid. It's about movement, especially if you're hypermobile. It's sometimes too exhausting for me to do, in which case I search out good sources of support and stabilization instead of collapsing. If I'm on it, sometimes I'm collapsing. Let's see what we got in the chat here. I know I have a few messages to catch up on. Airgender says, I want to know where the fuck people's shoulders are meant to go if they're laying on their sides. Mine just go right into my ears. There are those like square pillows. You know what I'm talking about? That is meant to keep the head elevated and the shoulder like below. Nope. Cube pillow. That's a square. We're talking about a cube. Like this, so it has like a high wall, and the idea here is that your neck is elevated and your shoulder has a crook of the corner of the pillow to fit in to, so that you cannot shrimpity dimpity, but I cannot vouch for it. I have not tried it. I'm intrigued, but I have not tried it. Closet Demon says, I love sleeping on my side, but I have to change sides like 10 times in the night. And yes, every single stuffy must move with me. It's a whole ordeal. This is another problem that vexes me about the squishmallow nest. Like, what if you're flopping and scooting around? How do you get everything back into place? Because you do want to move. Like, movement is also good. We're not trying to get bed sores here, or like stiff muscles. So like, yeah, how people manage the elaborate squishmallow nest while moving, it confounds me. Airgender says, can you construct some kind of stuffy conjoinment tube so all the stuffies move in unison? So what you're talking about here is basically human centipeding the squishmallows into a pregnancy pillow shape. In almost kind of like a long Furby type contraption. Like this. Basically stitching your squishmallows ass to mouth into a long Furby / pregnancy pillow that you could adjust and move all in concert. Which is really sick and twisted. Or putting them into a digestive tube like they're being vored. Wild idea. But it might work. I don't know. Closet Demon says, that'd be funny, but I like being able to adjust them, which would be hard if they were bagged. VNO says, after my gender confirmation surgery, I had serious nerve pain as all my shit got reconnected, and also could not bring myself to sleep on my back. Basically, just jammed a body pillow into my crotch, and the pressure seemed to help. Ooh, my God. Yeah, pillows can be magic sometimes. They did not give me enough oxy. Well, fuck them. That sucks. This Snorlax was a very big top surgery recovery buddy for me. Like, I did do a lot of just holding it against my chest, and that felt really nice. So that's my homie. But lower gender confirmation surgery in the crotch region, that sounds so tough to not have, like, getting that positioning right for, and like any sleeping. Dang. Like, I really like learned from top surgery how like actually not a big deal top surgery is. Like, so little of the body is actually really affected by it. Even your arms, you actually can move within a matter of days, to a pretty full range of motion, depending on which surgeon you talk to, and what aftercare guidelines you get. But yeah, gender confirmation surgery sounds like a trip for that. Closet Demon says, I wish my arms were retractable because they're the bane of my existence when sleeping. Airgender says, it's more that my top shoulder flops into my ear. Oh my God. Whoa. Well, where are you putting your arm? Because, like, yeah, if you're putting your arm up, for sure. Or does it just naturally, like, kind of slide? I'm just, like, picturing what you're talking about. So you can't, like, bring it down? That does sound painful. Airgender says, yes, the human centipede is what I'm suggesting, but I firmly maintain that it's not scary, and they like it. Well, you're a twisted individual for that. As are anybody who's made a long Furby. I don't like this shit. And I like Furbies. This shit's evil. I don't like that people hurt Furbies. I think we should just let them live. We should just let our stuffies live. We shouldn't be human centipeding them. No matter what kind of disabilities you have. Closet Demon says, yeah, top shoulder to ear cause pillow. Wait, what? Top shoulder to ear because pillows angle your shoulders. Oh. I'm having trouble picturing this, but just because it's like elevated. I really still dead ass can't figure out like whether your shoulders are supposed to be on the pillow or not. Because a lot of times it feels better to just be like all up on it, and have that support. But then the hunch could be happening, so it's very confusing. If you have a good sleep setup, again, I'd love to see pictures because this I'm experimenting a lot. Closet Demon says they're literally getting gender affirming care. Furbies want to be long. No, this isn't natural. This is not right. You're gonna tell me this is right? You're gonna tell me any Furby should be able to go in at any age and get this? Oh, this one's so scary. Oh god. This is the classic long Furby. And now there's like pre-made long Furby stuffies that you can get on like Amazon. That's bullshit. That's stolen valor right there. This one has arms also. This one's just a worm. No, this one's a shrimp. Oh my, I hate this. It's so mean to Furbies to do this. This one's like plaid. Oh my god. This is what you want. This is what hypermobile people want, and it's honestly so disgusting. It's like men getting leg extensions. Closet demons. Oh, and that's fucked up and twisted. Airgender says, yeah, I feel like there's not anything holding my top arm down, and my shoulder naturally creeps up to my ear, and I have to work to keep it down. Yeah. The top arm, though. That's so interesting. Mavalent says, I would be so happy if someone made or got me a long Furby. Long Furby like the pup dog of Furbies. Our hubris has wounded them. Yes. The cruelty, just like the human centipede. Our will to experiment. We were so busy asking ourselves if we could that we didn't ask ourselves if we should. And look, now they're lesbians. Look at this lesbian couple. This butch femme long Furby. This stuff's evil. Not because they're lesbians, but because they're long Furbies. Nobody clip that. Okay, I gotta stop looking at this stuff. This makes my tummy hurt. Oh my god, it's a long Labubu. No. Not long boo boo. No. Oh god. Okay, enough. Enough of this. Airgender says, what is that official long Furby DJ thing? Oh, I don't know. I don't know about any of this. Long boo boo. This sucks. Oh. All right, moving on. Oh, Jesus. My workflow and productivity have changed a ton in response to my disability. I use a sideways mouse. Voila. Like this. So you grip it sideways. This was one of the first things I got as a hypermobility adjustment. Holding the mouse regular style was really bothering me. It's easier on my wrist. The edge of my desk has L-shaped foam on the edge, so I have support when I'm typing. I switch between a seated and standing position at my desk throughout the day. I'm standing right now. Hello. I cannot type as much as I used to, so I use voice-to-text apps. Basically, any social media post or text message that I send is composed using my voice these days, as long as I'm like at home or like have privacy to do it. So that has led to some really weird typos and capitalization because Google message like voice to text sucks ass now because of AI and shitification. But whatever. But even with all these changes, I've had to accept that my productive capacity is not what it once was. It is not comfortable for me to sit at a desk for more than a few hours or to sit still for very long at all. I cannot withstand much political or social stress on the level that I used to. During the months that my hand didn't work, I was away from my home office the majority of my days, riding buses to medical campuses and wandering through Hyde Park in between appointments. I found all this time away from the dissociation machine and all my petty life problems to be quite meditative. And as I started recovering, I would assign myself long walks or runs on the lakeshore path or find a bunch of random errands to run so that I would not be pulled back into overwork again. I started cultivating new hobbies like singing, which did not require sitting at a computer or using my hands at all. I started playing a mobile video game, Pokemon Go, that does put some hand strain and phone use on me, but does require that I get out of the house, and that gave me an app to play with that wouldn't cause doom scrolling. And when I say the dissociation machine, that comes from a writer that I'm a big fan of, P.E. Muskowitz, who writes mental health, health as in hell, and on Substack. So mental health, hell, HELLTH, .xyz. And this post, the dissociation machine, is just talking about social media and internet use as a way to like detach from reality, and how when that's taken to a more extreme form, it's really unhelpful. Um, so so shout out to P.E. Muskowitz for that. She is great. My injury also emphasized to me the importance of receiving care, something I had always shied away from. Unlike most hypermobile patients, I was incredibly privileged to get a diagnosis almost right away and to be surrounded by curious, highly involved medical providers the entire time. From the moment I reported to the University of Chicago's orthopedics team, I was listened to and my case was carefully studied. My providers did additional research on injuries like mine, possible effects of the testosterone I was taking on the FPL tendon when I asked about it, and sought out support from colleagues when my test results were unusual. I had some like abnormal test results on some rheumatoid arthritis factors, even though it ended up not being that. The nursing staff at U of Chicago were especially warm and chatty with me, as were so many of the patients. Like I said, it just has a really nice culture to it. The emergency room at University of Chicago is dog shit, and they treat people horrifically and racistly. But in terms of the rest of the hospital and just like being around, like the vibes were such a lift. Though I was facing the loss of a body part that is essential to my creative life and career, I never really felt all that despairing at any of it, because I found learning about the mechanics of my body absolutely fascinating, and I was gaining so much meaningful contact with other people, and people who were like genuinely trying to help. The winter that led up to my injury had been a dour one that saw me spending most days banging away at my computer without much human contact, and flitting between upsetting headlines, then laying out in an anxious, stoned mess on my bed at night, unable to relax. But as soon as I got injured, I was working less, speaking to a ton of fascinating, skillful people who were interested in me, traveling every day all across my city, and spending my time cultivating my voice instead of languishing in my head. When this all first started happening, somebody told me that the left hand represented self-care in a variety of spiritual traditions, and encouraged me to see the injury as an opportunity to get more in touch with myself. I scoffed at it, but soon their statement proved to be true. I'd been putting too much pressure on myself psychologically and physically for a very long time, and at last stopping had become non-negotiable. I had a lot of my identity wrapped up in my ability to produce content, to sculpt my body into a masculine V, to carry everything on my own. But suddenly my life was no longer a thing I could grip so firmly, and I had to welcome it being cradled by others, and recognize the necessity of it being handled lightly by me. Every single time I catch my blood pressure rising, hear a shaming voice telling me that I should be doing more, or notice that familiar twinging in my wrist, I stop what I am doing. I have no choice but to commit myself to less pain, to throw away the martyrdom of suffering just for the sake of it, and set about the tedious, unending process of caring for my body as a living thing. Here is a picture that I took this winter at Montrose Beach. There is a barren, kind of small, juvenile-ish tree in front of some of the natural grass growth that's all like kind of blackened out from winter, and a kind of blue sky with some gray clouds, and just a bare beach. And I think, to be 100 with you, I was putting one of my Pokemon in a Pokemon gym that took me out here when I took this picture. I am sensitive and flexible to the pressures of my environment, sometimes excessively so. Where others can stand firm, I sway in the winds of life like the tendrils of a budding tree. And it's lovely to know now that this is how I function, and to see it in the funny waveforms of my stride, or the way a similarly wobbly loved one throws their thigh over my body in search of a grounding that I can't provide to myself, but can give to them. How wonderful to know how we need each other. How freeing it is to join together in falling apart. And that's the piece. Thanks everybody for being here and chatting about disabilities, pissabilities, and spoonyismness. Um, uh, this piece got some great comments from other hypermobile people, and people shared a few resources for various things. That's the edit button. What am I doing? A few people recommended a few like sources of like kind of gentle hypermobility friendly workout stuff in the chat. There's always people in the comments on these kinds of conversations saying like, oh shoot, do I got the thing, the hypermobility thing. Looks like we got some new comments. Oh, here's somebody asking for a for somebody to post one of my articles on Substack because it's free. So if you are interested in a few like potential resources to look at, there are some things in the comments worth kind of digging through. Maya mentioned whole body breathing as a course that they took for like just somatic stuff and like getting more in touch with breath and body movement. They also recommended the Human Garage on YouTube. And it's run by a craniosacral therapist and osteopath. I don't know much about any of this stuff. I can't necessarily vouch for it. And again, like I think with any kind of community that's been neglected by medicine, there is like a whole mix of like woo-woo and untested things and people just figuring things out on the fly and community-driven knowledge and charlatanry. So seek out and try out at your own risk. This person also shouts out psychedelics. Hell yeah. So there's a few little things in there that you can check out. Oh, another one that Irene McGarity recommended is Bendy and Badass. It's a community for people with POTS and hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, but it looks like it is paid. So be aware there. None of this is a pitch necessarily by any means, but there are some conversations happening in the comments that seem useful. So that's why we keep the comments around on Substack, because it's not too noxious. Viano says, banger ending, well wrote. Thank you. Birdie Bits says, hi, looks like I'm late today. I'm excited to check out the VOD later. Good to see you, Birdie Bits. Yeah, thanks for being here. Yeah, we're winding down because I got some stuff to do this evening. And we went through like at such a good speed today. Let me look at. Yeah, we've only been on here for 2 hours and 43 minutes instead of like the 4 hours we sometimes get into talking about shit. So great job, everybody. Again, feel free to hit the Piscord if you want to chat with other disabled people about this stuff and all kinds of transgender freaks and hang out and make that space what you want of it. It's truly whatever people want to do with it. And a lot of cool things have come from that. But I do honestly want to see people set up so people want to post any pictures of any workstations. I know Annika Transpeaks already did. But if anybody else wants to, I'm very interested to see that stuff. The next piece that I'm going to have running is I'm entering a research block, a research roundup block on the Substack. So I have a piece coming up soon in the next couple of weeks that is looking at a study that found that social media posts that use the language of moral outrage to talk about an issue, moral outrage causes a post to get more shares. Or a petition to get more shares, but it doesn't lead to the petition getting more signatures. So that's fun. So we'll talk all about that research and their findings. And there's a few other social psych kind of studies about political activism, like what's effective and what isn't in activism, that I'm wanting to write up kind of like short Substack posts about. I'm wanting to move away from much personal stuff. This one was pretty personal, but I'm feeling very naturally that kind of come into an endpoint somewhat. In terms of personal narrative driven stuff for a while, and I want to really, there's a bunch of research studies that I want to write up for the Substack. So I think that's going to be the next month or two of articles, sharticles, if you will. So I'm looking forward to that. And that's always so fun with the chat, like talking about breaking down some of the stats and method stuff. And knowing and figuring out from like y'all's responses what makes sense and what doesn't, if you don't already have a background in it, is just like so fun. So excited to do that. We have a few video game streams hopefully coming up. The Coffin of Andy and Lele, I think, is one that me and Imogen are talking about doing. And then I really want to do Slay the Princess, which is like kind of a horror game that sounds very. Some people have said it's very like systems, like plurality kind of related, and seems really creepy and fun. And so I want to do that too. Transpeak said, "Is there time for a bag of milk inside a bag of milk?" I don't know. I don't have the energy today, honestly. For more gaming. Um, how long did you say it was? Like 20 minutes? I don't think I have it in me today. Hellblade. Yes, I also need to play Hellblade, Sensuous Sacrifice. Yeah, there's a lot of games that I want to stream. I need to start setting aside time specifically for that. Because I love doing a deep read of a game on here. No, I'm Not a Human was so fucking good to play on stream. So 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah, I'm already, yeah, I know that's short, but I also know that anytime we do a game on stream, it takes twice as long because we're talking about it. And yeah, I want to give it my full attention rather than being antsy. Oh, Closet Demon says, "Wait, can you show your new tattoo? Because I haven't seen it since it was unwrapped." Yeah, sure. This is my Sona. This same little guy. Very happy with it. Snugglebug Inc. in Chicago. Furry, trans, tattoo artist. Very gentle, very strong communicator. Highly recommended. Yeah, the stream for No, I'm Not a Human. It was just one stream of like 5 hours, and it's here on the YouTube. So it's fun. It was a really, really great game about just like pandemic isolation, judging people for seeming different or seeming neurodivergent, how like you can't trust government information about public health things, the paranoia that sets in when systems break down. Oh, so moving. Such a good game. And the stream I think was really like a fun conversation, and like unpacking all of that stuff on the fly is so fucking fun. Sasha says, "Been popping in and out of here because distracted, but the hypermobility chat essay really resonated with me. Love the streams as always. Thanks for being here. Thanks everybody for your contributions to the chat. I think I am going to leave it here for now. If you're watching this as a VOD, you can follow me on YouTube to get notifications when I'm live and participate in these chats. And otherwise, all my stuff is on Substack or YouTube. Thank you everybody for being here, and I'll see ya on the next one. Have a good evening or whatever time zone you're in. Bye bye.